Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Friday, January 9th. Usually I would take this day off in terms of posting videos. I have videos to go up on my Apocalypse Now channel, which is a farm update, and a video to go up on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. They were supposed to go up today, but they'll go up tomorrow on Saturday. There'll be no video here Saturday, and let people catch up on whatever content here. But, this story is a breaking story, and it looks so contrived. It looks like one of these psychological operations. And, it's telling us what their plans are, intentions, and things like this. So I did a long voiceover. It's like an hour and a half, just about, some realizations I've had. It was just, I think it's kind of an epic voiceover just about the state of the country and the rest of that stuff. And so let's get to that stuff. Let's get to the voiceover first. Then I cover the ICE thing and the D Vance reaction, his bullshit thing, and then the rest of the weird stuff around this, and explain, my point of view about what this really means and what's really happening here. All right, so let's get into it here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I finished a video yesterday with a voiceover. Today is Thursday, January 8th. This video's going up on Saturday. I'm taking tomorrow off. The video that's uploaded now that'll be going public, whatever it is, tonight at 9 o'clock. Thursday at 9 o'clock. By the time you listen to this, it'll be 2 days ago. And then on Friday, I'll put up a video that I make today on my Apocalypse Now channel. And, that's the schedule now. For those of you who have extra time and want more content from this channel or the other channel, there'll be some shorter videos over there on the days off. I'm trying to keep that channel monetized for the obvious reasons. Okay, so I finished the video with a voiceover, and not everyone makes it to the end of the video, but it was how I was more and more aware how fucking stupid people are, just in terms of their level of consciousness and awareness. And stupid's not even the right word, just NPC, just not conscious, not awake, not alive. People say I woke up, which is a whole thing, right? So, and that there's a lot of intelligent people that are not awake, people with high IQs. And I was talking about this, in terms of content, how much stupid content is out there where everything has to be explained to people. And if you listen to that voiceover, right after that, I was, and I'd said something in a previous video where I was like, these people leaving comments, they're trying to think for themselves. They just suck at it. They just, they come up with not great results. They're thinking for themselves, but the results are bad. And I see this in the comment section all the time, which I'll come back to. And, I featured 3 comments that were like that. People who, they were obviously trying to think a little bit outside the box and think for themselves, which is good, which I'd encourage, but they're just horrible at it. They'd just be better off as sheeple, right? They just don't have the capacity to do it. And, so I was talking about all that, and I went to look through the comment sections, and one of my viewers said that they had searched, the average IQ, which is 100, which I now believe it's always 100. That's, even if they change the standards, they're changing the standards for education because people are getting dumber. The average IQ is always 100, and then the person asked a question, some questions about the average IQ, what that person's capable of, and I went deeper into it with Gemini, and I asked all these questions and compared it to other IQs. I was asking about what someone with 100 IQ is capable of, and it's not great, right? And 50% of the people are below 100 IQ. That's the top of the medium, the top of the average. 50% of the people have 100 IQ or lower. And so that's half the population right there. And if you're asking about the 100 IQ, that's the top of that group. That's the top of half of the population. And you know the response of like what a person's capable of, and they started off with like a person with a 100 IQ is capable of living on their own, like being out and not with support and help of Of course, there's a system that helps people. It's very easy to be independent and live on your own if you just have a job, you can pay bills and do those things like that's like it wasn't like that was one of the accomplishments. Like half the people, it's like, oh, half the people on the top of the 100 IQ. There's some people, and then they get down to a certain level of IQ where people need assisted living. They can't do it on their own. And again, I was saying in the voiceover, an IQ isn't really a good indicator because there's people who just do well in school and they have the right kind of learning style and they're going to test better, and they're going to show they have some level of like a higher level consciousness in terms of their academic excellence, but they're like total sheeple, or they're so emotionally stunted and they're spiritually there's nothing there. And so like there's people who are really really smart, but that's all they're that's their thing, but they're not anything else. They're every other area of their life there's less, right? They have like a good brain, they have a good like capacity in terms of their brain's capacity, but they're not. That's it for them, right? They're not good at. They're really remedial and like retarded everywhere else, right? So they're less than in these other areas, and so like there isn't a good way of indicating this other than just how you experience people, right? Your ability to read other people and see where their capacities are, right? But in America, 50% of the people are really, under what, would be considered any sort of having the ability for abstract thought and, the ability for understanding of God's true nature. This is why religions step in. And it sort of just clicked for me because then I asked Gemini about people with 120 IQs and 140 IQs. And so I was tested at Yale when I was a kid because I have dyslexia and my parents thought I was like retarded. And, I had trouble with whatever it was in school. I didn't have trouble with it because I had I was perfectly fine. They had trouble with me, the school system and my parents with, my performance. Would not, like I would get my B's and my D's confused and whatever it was, P's and Q's and other issues. My mom was really obsessed with me having allergies, and I didn't bother me at all. I didn't think about it at all. Like I didn't complain about it. I didn't, whatever it was she was observing because she was kind of a hypochondriac, and the school system and my parents. Decided that I was somehow, having issues, with my schoolwork, which, whatever it was, like I could read at 12th grade level. I would go to the library and I would look up my favorite animals, and I was reading adult level encyclopedias, right? These kind of things. And so, I had a 12th grade comprehension level when I was in third or fourth grade, like in terms of whatever the test was like, but I didn't care about like school. I was like bored all the fucking time, right? I just, I looked forward to recess. I was physical. I played, sports and was very active, like the kids were back then, and I didn't have the consciousness and the awareness of it, but I was reading fucking adult level, like, encyclopedias and, whatever it was, books and shit. And so, what they were teaching in class was for second graders and third graders. So I was like bored. Like I didn't, I was good at math and good at like pattern recognition, but not great. But, most of the time in school, there is like just a lot of the stuff's repeated and remedial. It was just boring, right? Like I didn't know that like at the time, but that's how I was experiencing it. And then, they took this test and they said I had an IQ of like 143 or something like that. I barely know about it because my parents didn't talk to me about it. We never had conversations, so they didn't tell me about whatever it was, right? But there were some issues, and I was diagnosed as dyslexic, and my mom wouldn't tell me this until I was close to being 40 years old, because my parents were like criminally incompetent. But at some point, my parents got intimidated. Like at this point, my parents were sort of intimidated by me, and like I had no idea, and I kind of knew I was smarter than them because I was having these epiphanies and realizations, like I couldn't count on them, and like I was having to tell them what to do. And as I got older, more and more, like I remember my mom talking to me when I was in my 20s, and I'm advising her on her marriage to my dad, like, and I'm like, this is kind of fucked. Like, I should be going to them for advice and things like that, right? Like, we would play board games and card games, and they were so slow, like their capacity to make the right move and things like this, that I would have to tell them, this is what you have to do. And my parents weren't dumb, so they were college educated. My dad was, relatively smart, even though he was like a complete loser and incompetent. And, so anyways, the reason I'm continuing this, I was thinking about some of these things. Like I've been really reflective, now that I've gotten into my later years. And I'm understanding things that I didn't understand. Like, sometimes not sometimes, as you get older, you have things that you developed in past lives, especially if you've had like many past lives or whatever it might be. Like access to, you have access to programs inside of you that don't kick in until you get older. Like, when you become a parent, something changes in you. Like you're just a different person. You're functioning on a different level. When you go out and you move out of your parents' house, all of a sudden, these survival mechanisms and these abilities that you didn't know you had kick in, right? Like I'm relatively a good cook. Like I'm good at cooking food. I obviously had some past life experience. I just have a knack for it. And it really didn't come about. Like I took a home ec class when I was in high school, and I started cooking foods, making omelets, and I was interested in it. And then of course I moved out on my own, and I learned to do macrobiotic cooking because my brother was doing it, and I was suffering like poor health from drinking and drug use right when I was in college. And then as I got older, and I was married, my ex got sick, and I started taking over all the cooking. And then it's just sort of gotten better since then, and like a knowledge base. But it was it took a long time for me to really develop the level that I'm on now in terms of cooking. Like I just have a sense of it. And the same thing with farming. Like I didn't know anything about farming, and there's things that I'm just good at. Like I've developed these capacities and cutting paths and doing things. So you have these things that you have inside of you, and they're looking for the right environment and the right circumstance to be pulled out of your system. And I was saying probably about 5 years ago, whenever it was, that I just feel like I'm a competent person now. Like after all these years, it took until my 50s where I finally understood life. I kind of understood how I function. I have abilities, but I also have I don't want to call them sensitivities, but things, and that I have to things that I have to compensate for that just aren't, maybe they're good things. There might be like good things if in a different type of civilization, but this modern day system, they're not good. And I have to just I don't want to say protect myself, but just be aware that like some of these things, I'm not suited for this system the way other people are. Some of it's about being introverted, but some is just like I can't, go to some, like I couldn't go sit at the dropping the ball at the New York, whatever it is, Manhattan Plaza or whatever it is there that they do that. Like be in a crowd like that, go to bars, do those things, which I don't have any desire to do anyway. But there were things that I used to do that, would drain me, and they would kind of make me glitch out or whatever it is, these kind of things. And, the other thing is that people used to live hundreds of years, thousands of years. There's human beings that live a lot longer. Like a human life are purposely cut short because of there's been genetic manipulation, and, this version of human beings is more like a cloned slave than a genetically modified slave, like the people that are on planet Earth right now, than, what we're designed to be. Because, I've said this before. Your four things that you need to do, you need to, when you become an adult, have some kind of career, right? Have kids and have a marital relationship with somebody else, and spirituality are all packed into this one period between the ages of 20 and 40, right? 20 and 50. And, you're doing all four of these things at once, and every one of those things can take up most of your time. Like all of those things, if you're going to do any of those things well, and they take up most of your time, and then you don't have a proper support system, because our system wants you to be a worker and a consumer first and foremost. Like you're supposed to consume and work. That's what the society wants you to do. Consume as much of whatever it is that you consume, whether it be goods and products and services or content. They want you to spend, your non-working hours consuming. And, in terms of being a parent and developing a loving relationship with your spouse, those things are, neglected. And then they don't want you to have any kind of spiritual life at all. They don't want you to have any connection with the divinity within you. And in fact, the religions are very materialistic and encourage materialism. But if you lived 1,000 years or 300 years, you could do each of these things separately, right? You could, have a career for 40 years, whatever, 50 years. And then you could get married and just be with that person for a number of years, and then have kids. And then, whatever, pursue your spiritual life after that. And you'd still have like 100 years to do that or more, right? Like, and in conjunction with these other things, right? But when you have all four of these things packed together and you have this limited time, and by the time you get through all that stuff, you finally like are able to understand what you are as a person, right? Like you're, if you have like this kind of level of consciousness, you finally get it, right? You're like, yeah, this is what's like, this is how I am, and this is how it is again in the world. Like I understand the system, I understand the world, and I understand myself. Congratulations, get ready to die, right? So that's where we're, this is the kind of a situation we have. They had this thing in the movie Blade Runner. The clones were designed to live 4 years. They were superior, they were physically superior and stronger. And some of them were smarter. Not money, most of them weren't. But they were, they were designed to have a short period of time where they could be workers, and then they would expire, prematurely. So, and I was thinking about this, that I had a mixed experience of, and again, smart is not the right word, that I had sort of well, going back to what I was saying about the IQ thing, two things I wanted to say about it. The first one is the people between the IQ of 120 and 140, which, I'm somewhere in that range, I think now. You get stupider as you get older, whatever. But my consciousness is, much higher because of the meditation and the spiritual, practice. But your brain doesn't work as well. You just can't do things as well as you did before. You start forgetting things, and these things. And so your IQ is going to come down, but your consciousness can go up. But either way, those people are the top 10%, right? So, people watching this channel who understand what I'm talking about, because in the beginning, I made videos that stupid people could watch. I made Illuminati videos. I made, things that are, about stuff that would go be for a wider audience. And I didn't do this intentionally. It was what I was capable of doing, right? So, there was kind of I was going through a crisis where, there's my marriage was over, and, I was married for 18 years to a person with severe mental issues who had higher developed qualities, but someone who had been sexually abused by her dad and emotionally and physically abused by her mom, and was, just fucked up, broken person, right? Someone broken by, not just the circumstances of her life, but also, patterns of behavior she had illustrated through past lives or whatever it is, right? Victim consciousness. things don't randomly happen to you. That's part of the Sajmark teaching. It's your what we call your samskaras, and you have to rise above them. And she couldn't. And there was a period of time where I thought she could, but she couldn't. Right. So that fell apart. And I had my own issues with not being prepared and just not being a competent person. And my family was fucked. Right. And so like with anything else, it could go one way or the other, and it went the other way. Right. The way that I didn't think it was going to go because I thought the Sajmark method of meditation and the higher nature would win out, and that there was a purpose for this thing, and the purpose was for success. A successful marriage, a successful family. That was not the purpose. But through the divorce process and the family breaking up and my kids going their separate ways, and the pain of all that, when the goal was to have an intergenerational family farm, it brought up an anger I had, a bitterness I had towards God, like a blaming of God and anger towards God from some previous existences, right? And so, anyways, I've talked about this in the Journey series and other places, but as this was falling apart, the YouTube channel took off, and like I had made one celebrity video about Jennifer Aniston, then I made these ones about Michelle Obama and these things. 95% of her being a man, which I've talked about in recent videos. And that video popped, ended up getting 2 million views. And, as the marriage was falling apart, my mom had died, and I had some inheritance money. Like, it was just, it's like 70 grand. And, we were in a kind of desperate situation in various ways, and, the divorce was happening. And my ex left and went back to America. My kids and I were in India. And before that happened, like right before she left, I knew the channel was taking off, and I knew it was like divine, there was some reason for it, because my preoccupation was a Sajmark meditation and the people connecting to the divinity within them. And I knew that like things were going south, and, we were about to reach the point where we're at now. Like I knew this was predicted as part of the prophecies that these things were going to happen, these whispered the brighter world messages, and that there was a limited opportunity for people before some kind of collapse situation was to kind of be aware of this spiritual depravity that humanity suffers from, right? A lack of connection to divinity. And so I was seeing that the YouTube channel had a purpose. And so I was like, well, I have to make this channel a job. Like I have to be able to bring in income, and I have to make it financially viable. I was making some money, but I had to make more. So I looked at the videos, and I had made around 10 videos. And so this is 2014. So I had this YouTube channel for 7 years. And most of the videos were about homesteading and things like that. And my top videos in terms of making money and views were celebrity-related videos. And I was like, fuck. Because I just, even as a kid, I read like a People magazine. I watched Entertainment Tonight. And I was like, this is not for me. Like, I just don't give a shit about celebrities and the celebrity culture. Like, I like content. Good TV shows and good movies and things like that. But that's about it. And I don't, hold these people up on a pedestal. And I'm not interested in their lives. And I'm not interested in Hollywood. And I realized that if I was going to make this channel viable and I was going to make contact with lots of people, that I had to do celebrity videos. Like I had done, I could do, up to that point, I figured I could do one a month. Like it was like slumming. It was like, cleaning toilets. It was like, gross for me. Like it was, and I was going to have to dive into this fucking cesspit of Hollywood and, pop culture shit. And now, of course, politics, to, make this channel viable, to connect with people. And I went through like this, oh, fuck, it's like almost like having a conversation with God saying, really? And so, I made content that I met people, I had to meet people where they were. Because, I myself was not conscious that I had spiritual tendencies for most of my life. I was aware it was there. I was aware of it because there was like some, it had emerged a little bit, but I just wasn't conscious of it the way I should have been. I wasn't seeking it. And, and I wasn't really awakened to that until I was 29. And so, other people are going to have that same situation. And this was a vehicle for them to make contact with that part of themselves. And so I had to meet them where they're at. Like I couldn't, just talk about spiritual things to people who were unconscious of their spiritual tendencies. Like they had to be, I had to find some common ground with them and talk about things where they were, wherever they were. And because of that, I made content for stupid people, not intentionally, but I was just covering stupid shit. And, I got lots of views from people who have remedial type of, mental abilities and, spiritual abilities, because that's where most people are at. I'm going to go eat breakfast now, so I'm going to cover two more things. I'm giving myself a note. I want to talk about my experience in high school, and then also I want to talk about India and people's IQ there. Okay, so back at it here. I ate breakfast. So what happened was, since I think New Year, it might have been longer than that, but I've been like just off. And I don't know, I felt weird New Year's Eve with the whole, it was like surreal watching these morons on the fucking three different channels, bring in the new year, just the depravity and the weirdness and all of it. Like I just, I had a weird experience watching that. Like just, and I've had this thing where I've been feeling like this might be the last time I see a Super Bowl or last time I see, for whatever reason, 2026 year of accountability. But my wife and I did this cleanse, parasite cleanse, and it went fairly well. I had one bad night, really bad night. And I misread the label. I took too much black walnut. Again, I don't recommend things, but this is what we were doing. And then I just I wasn't getting enough sleep. And last night I took a half-hour nap while my wife and I were watching TV. And like I just felt like the first time I was fully caught up in my sleep. It was a weird thing. And then last night, I had trouble going to sleep last night, but I slept till 10 this morning, which is usually 2 or 3 hours after I usually wake up. So that backed everything up. But I'm feeling, like clear. Like I feel like I've gotten enough sleep and I'm sort of acclimated to 2026 or whatever was going on. So after I ate breakfast, and I'm going to do probably a video on my Apocalypse Now channel where I do farm update. So you guys, if you're interested in the farm stuff, occasionally I show stuff here. We got this mystery little tiny egg, that green egg that one of the new chickens is laying, and we're trying to figure out which chicken it is. So that's kind of cool. And I'm going to cover that on my other channel today. That'll be up on Friday, the Apocalypse Now channel. But I cook kasha or buckwheat, roasted buckwheat, and I have it with usually 2 or 3 eggs. Today was 2 because I'm eating breakfast so late. And I take the leftover kasha, and we have some mealworms, and we had some grain that we bought that we didn't use. They sent me the wrong bag of grain. It was like rye. And sometimes we use oatmeal. And we mix it together, make like a little hen food. We'll get a big bag of organic oatmeal, and I throw it out the back door, and all the chickens come up to the back door. And my hand gets it's because the kasha is kind of moist and sticky, and my hands will get whatever, and got on the back door. And I have to throw the stuff in wide range. So the little chickens, the baby chickens and the younger chickens and the bantams, they'll get pecked on if I throw it too close. I spread it out so all the chickens get, access to some food. And I keep on pushing, and my wife was watching me, like I've been doing this for months. And my wife was watching me. And she said, there's that thing on the door where you could just hold it open. And so, we were talking about intelligence, like I've been fucking doing it stupidly, right? I'm talking about, all this stuff and IQs and all these things. And I've been like retarded, fucking moron. I was like, oh yeah, it makes it so much easier. Because I keep on having to push the door open to throw the food over it, and that's a whole fucking thing, right? And, there's that little thing on the thing that holds the door open, where there's this little metal, you know what it is, like, these screen doors that holds the door open. And, everyone knows about those things, and certainly I do, and I just never thought about it. Like, and usually I'm good at that kind of thing, but, there you go. The other thing, getting back into it, You know, the stuff that there was a shooting, this ICE shooting, which maybe, looked a little kind of fakish. I don't know. I'll have to look into it more. But an ICE agent shot an American citizen in the head. So today's Thursday, January 8th, and that story's blowing up. And that we'll see how long that story lasts, but I'll be talking about that later in this video. But just to give some context to people listening to this in the Journey series sometime in the future, if that story becomes big, it probably could become big for a little bit and then disappear. So, I had this dichotomy where I was viewed as being retarded, being like dumb or whatever, and having dyslexia and having some like disability, what people would call a disability, and also being like really smart, like genius level, the upper 10%. So I had both of those things. Like my parents, where I was physically strong and I was an athlete, and then my mom also, worried that I was weak because of the allergies, right? Like just like my parents were so fucking incompetent in the mixed messages, and we didn't really talk and communicate, but this was communicated to me. And so I went to high school. My freshman year, I was put in this school. Well, I went to an eighth grade where it was just like this little small Catholic school, and it was really weird. Like it was 12 kids and 3 nuns, right? Like fucking. And I think it was because of some, my parents were really sending me this idea that I was fucked up somehow, and I didn't, I had it subconsciously, like I didn't really fully understand it. And then when I went to high school, they put me in I was in normal classes, but I went to this room during study hall where it was like all fucking kids with like fucked up kids, like disability kids. And some of them were like actually, maybe borderline Down syndrome kids. And, so there's like 4 or 5 kids that went in there. And I was definitely the cream of the crop. And, I realized that if I I like the kids were fine. They were nice kids. They were dumb but nice, mostly, remedial. One kid was kind of fucked up. His eye was all fucked up. He was like, he had some kind of, like really like fucked up looking kid. People picked on him. And I think he was kind of a jerk, in some ways. And he was probably like stayed back 3 years. He was, he was like 17 as a freshman or something. But I remember thinking like, if people see me with these kids, it'll like, and I didn't even understand social. I mean, I was not aware of the social situation in high school, and it was very cliquey and things like this. But we lived in a suburb where a lot of the people were very successful. It was Simsbury, Connecticut. It's like a suburb of a suburb. And it was like people who worked in the city. Many of them worked at the insurance industry in Hartford. And these kids were very academically motivated. And a lot of them would go to Ivy League schools. I think probably, there was probably 240 kids in my graduating class. I think there was, or maybe 500 kids, I think. Because there was, I think, 2,000 kids in this school. So there's around 500 kids, and I bet 100 or so went to Ivy League schools, right? There was a kid in our school that got a perfect score on the SAT, and there was like 4 or 5 other kids that missed 1 or 2 questions, right? So, there was really smart kids, and, I knew some of them, and fucking, they were just way smarter than me. I hung out with some of these nerds, and, I wasn't really good academically because I didn't care. Like, I didn't, my dad was a guidance counselor. I was completely unprepared. And, later on I would get this Vedic astrology reading. And the time I was 10 years old, I had this, my mom had this operation kind of thing they did where they stuck like this, some kind of, syringe-like thing. It was bigger than a syringe up my nose and into my sinuses. And they were trying to shrink my adenoids, which is a fucking gland. It was just butchery, right? And I think they were using some kind of steroids, and it hurt like hell. I mean, like it was basically up in my brain, like fucking, if you look where the adenoid is. So it's a gland, and I think it's responsible, well, I'll look at it for a second, but if I'm looking at a picture right now, and it's right above it's right in the middle of the ear. So going through my nose, all the way through my sinus cavity, they were spraying this stuff, and this, this stuff is, it's it's a lymphatic tissue high in the throat, behind the nose, and traps germs in childhood, helping immune system fight off infection until around age 5 or 8 when they normally shrink. And they decided to shrink this fucking thing. I'm 10 years old, because my mom's hypochondria. And fucking, I can't fucking, like, I feel like I'm going to die. Tears are rolling down my face. Like, and I wasn't a kid that cried a lot, whatever. And my mom freaks out, tells the guy to stop because she was just a fucking moron, right? Like, I mean, this, almost this is like child abuse, like stupid shit, right? And unnecessary operation. They have a lot of these things where they, where they remove your tonsils and all this stuff, and your gallbladder and your appendix and all these kind of things, and these are organs that have a purpose in your body, and I don't know if it's had any long-term effects, but I got mono. I woke up the next day, and my glands in my neck were so swollen they looked like golf balls. I look in the mirror, and my glands on my neck were so swollen, and I got mono for like a whole fucking year. By the time I was in 4th grade, where I couldn't play sports, I couldn't play at recess. I missed 3 months of school. In the last 3 months, I couldn't do anything. I had real bad, severe case of fucking mono because my mom fucked my immune system with this stupid operation, right? And at that time, there was like other things. Like I played on a soccer team, and we were like a very young soccer team. Like we were all, when we first played, we were mostly kids who were 6 or whatever it was, like the youngest age 7. I think I must have been 10 years old when this happened. I'm not sure which. I was in 4th grade. And so when I was in 2nd grade, we had the soccer team, and we were all little kids. Like the other teams had bigger, older kids. We like lost every game. We lost most games. There's a couple older kids on our team, but mostly that. And then in 3rd grade, we were one of the best teams. And in 4th grade, we were all now old, and we was like, our almost whole team was older kids. And we had played together for 2 years, and they ended up winning the championship, but I couldn't fucking play because, I was like in the fucking hospital or some shit. And these kids come over, and they give me my trophy because I was a part of the team, like fucking teammates. And I'm like, fuck, like, well, and I was not totally aware my mom like fucked me, up, but like as I got older, I realized this whole thing, right? And, when I went to get this Vedic astrology reading, it said I was in a Rahu period, which is a time where you're, in a daze, like a shadowy period, depression, suicide, drug use, these things. And so that's when it kicked off. Like I got this, so it's part of like my destiny, right? Like my mom sucked, but it was like supposed to happen, right? And then when I was 14, me and my buddy built a zip line, and it was fucking sketchy as shit. It was like we used wire, and we were both like, I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school, and he was like a year or two younger than me, and he was smaller than me, and we were like, I weighed 100 pounds. Like I was one of the smaller kids in my high school freshman year, and we couldn't pull this wire tight enough. We didn't have the weight, so it would be like it was bowed. It was like a wire that was like, and we had this pulley that was, and we were up like 30 feet. And the second time I tried it, I had gloves on, and I slipped off, and I woke up in the hospital. And, I had a concussion. So, then I started getting headaches, and I think I get, some of my headaches have to do with my ear, so I don't know if that was affected, some of my migraines I get. But, like, I started having migraines, and I started smoking pot. So, like, I was just out of it. Like, I was kind of in a daze my freshman, my first couple years of high school, because, it takes a while to recover from all that shit. And I was, when I was in this Rahu period spiritually, right? Like it's a shadow planet, like they have these planets that they're there, but they're not physically there. Like they're like a planet that used to be in the solar system that still has some spiritual pull or something. And it's like brings darkness into your life. And so I was in this Rahu period till I was 29, and that's when I found the spiritual thing. So I was in this kind of daze-like period. Unfocused, lost. I didn't have really a purpose, a goal. I didn't see a future, and America didn't make sense to me, the American dream, and it still doesn't. But it makes sense now, but like not from where I was as a kid, and I just didn't know why I didn't fit in. And I was in a high school where there was lots of people who were really smart, kids who were really smart. So I thought that I was just probably below average. I mean, I knew I was smart, but I knew I wasn't smart as some of the kids that I hung out with, and some of the at least in terms of academically, and I didn't care about academics, right? Like if I cared about something, I would invest in it, but I didn't care about the things that was, school was just like some, thing like I had to do. It was like, a prison for, like it's like a thing where you were locked in. These schools look like prisons, right? I mean, they're now set up like prisons where you have to go through a security system and all that shit. But if you can turn a school into a prison and a prison into a school, right? They're the same basic building structures. I mean, part of our school system is just childcare. It's just so that parents could go out and work and all these things. So, but either way, like I didn't have this idea of being like, in the top of any kind of thing, right? Like I didn't think about that, as any kind of situation where I was like in the top level of like IQs, the top level of any of these kind of things. And certainly spiritually, I mean, I was smoking pot and I was like, occasionally did like coke and shit like that, right? Through my college years and these other things. So it wasn't like I thought I was like evolved person, like somebody who was, the cream of the crop. Like there was none of that. I mean, early on when I was a kid, maybe there was, some consciousness of that kind of thing. But, I've been a failure in terms of if you were going to define my life as the standards of the materialistic system we live in. I mean, certainly I've been an underachiever. Like, when I played sports, I was, not, I wouldn't say a lead athlete, but I was in the top 90%. Like I could, I was in dunk contests. I mean, I could jump and I was fast and, I have good hand-eye coordination. And, my family has natural athletes. And so, I should have played college level basketball or at least sat on the bench at a Division I school or played, started a Division II or something. But, I couldn't get my shit together to do that. Like, so, but I had, the athletic ability. Like I had, top 20% athletic ability, whatever it is. And I'm smart enough. I mean, I'm a higher level IQ and these things, whatever, despite whatever. Dyslexia is actually a gift and not it serves me well here. But, I never was career focused and underachieved. I didn't have any kind of real, anything to speak of in terms of a career. I got a master's degree in counseling. I worked in that field for a little bit, and I feel like I put out good content here years later. But in terms of, material success, and my family, my kids and I don't talk, so, in terms of material success, I've built homesteads and I have success with that. And, I have a successful relationship now with my, my second wife and all these things. So, but underachiever and, somebody who most people look at as a failure or a loser in terms of like the materialistic success, right? I don't think about it that way. And I'll talk about how I think about it at the end of this little piece here. But, in India, when I went there and I ate a vegetarian diet because it was recommended in the meditative practice. The vegetarian diet is good to eliminate aggression and, this idea of ahimsa is one of the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga, which is, ahimsa is nonviolence, right? So to alleviate violent, negative tendencies, which, predators have, right? So if you eat meat, but it's not good, the vegetarian diet is not good for protein and getting enough protein. And when I was in India, there were these people who were closer to like monkeys than they were to human beings. Like they were malnourished. And, they have the caste system there, and there's so many fucking people. And there's people that were like between 4 and 5 feet tall. They lived in these thatch huts that were like, 8 by 8 rooms with a small roof because they're short. And they have like, a few belongings, a couple of pots, and they cook and they shit on the streets. Lots of people there just there doing this. And I saw these people, right? And, when you meet like Indian people here in America, they're like the cream of the crop. They're like people who, they have unbelievable academic pressure. Like kids commit suicide if they fail a test. They're like lives are ruined, right? And, there's a lot there. But, they have higher level. These people who come to America, again, they usually have their shit together, hard workers and good academically. And so you think these people are like smarter. Like you see foreign exchange students and people from other schools, people from China, and they're like elite level people that get recruited. Like the people who get recruited by companies are the smartest of the smart, right? They're the top 1% and they're, 5% in their country, and then they get recruited by Western countries and they come here and make a lot of money. But if you go to India itself, there's just people who are really not very developed. And they, again, lack of protein in their diet, lack of resources, lack of any sort of education. And then the prejudice that's in the caste system. And, when we first got to India, we stayed there for 3 years. And, our kids always grew up on a farm. They always had chores. But my family ended up being kind of in crisis, and my ex was like just flipping the fuck out. This is at the beginning, before she left. And we hired a maid. And the maid was kind of a pain in the ass, but she, it was amazing what what you would pay a maid. We paid her like $70 a month. And later when my ex left, I hired a better maid. Like, people came up and said, look, we can get you a maid, right? People live there. And some of these people would have 4 or 5 servants, like a driver. And, these rich people, many of them who do the meditation were rich for Indian standards. And they'd pay them like $70 a month, and they would have these people like full-time employees. This woman would come to our house. She would cook a meal, and she did for 2 or 3 people. And I was overpaying her. Like, if I was Indian, I would have paid her like $50 a month, right? Like, they were charging us more because we were, white people from America. But, and this woman was a nice lady. She had a couple of cute kids, and, just peppy, but she barely spoke English. And she would come in and cook a meal and clean the house, and, everything was going south for my kids. So, I was like, usually they would do these chores, but they were less like, I was like, let's fuck it. Let's just, have this maid here. And when we were coming to India the first time, we stayed in Chicago. We flew out of Chicago, and it was a whole thing. And there's a really nice young Indian man who was here in America who was from India, and he was just really sweet and helpful and just, was gracious and just the best, person, just wonderful. It really helped us. And I would see him from time to time in India, and it was always like, how you doing? And, helping out. And then one day we were at the canteen, and there were some people there that were a lower caste than him. And he started to yell at them like they were fucking dogs, right? Like they were like subhuman. And I was like, holy shit, bro. Like, this person was way nicer and way better than me, like more considerate. And I mean, he was an elite person, high, a kid with a academic success and material success in America. But he was just like, the way he treated these people, like these fucking, these people in this lower caste. And it really, so what I'm trying to say here is that in America, because of the protein in our education system, we have, and again, Americans aren't big into school like these other countries, but still everyone gets some level of education. Our IQs are fucking higher here. Like, Americans are smarter, have more consciousness, have access to more levels of, just more access to different levels of understanding. Our content is better. There's just so much more money and resources in our system. So, for example, like, there was these people that were building a building. So we rented a few different flats, and we had a neighborhood that was across the street from the ashram. It was like almost like a little closed neighborhood of like a few beautiful houses for like rich people and some apartment buildings. And we lived in an apartment building, and we were paying for apartment building with like marble floors, and showers and air conditioning, which is a big thing in India. Like, a lot of people don't have that shit. We were paying like $500 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment, right? So it was like, you understand the value of the American dollar compared to what the rupee that's there. And there was, they were putting up a building, and they had these people that were living in the structure. Like, they had the girders down, and it was a swamp area, so they built it up with topsoil or, like whatever soil they dumped in there. And they lifted the place up so it was, it would be out of the floodplain. And eventually it did flood there, so this was like important. The place, we had 3 feet of water, whereas the actual, the level of the earth there, the level, our apartment was built up like 10 to 12 feet. So the water that was at the actual water level there was like 15 feet, right? When it flooded. So there's this apartment building, they had the girders up, and these people were in there sleeping in the girders, and they were carrying shit on their heads, and they worked fucking all day in the heat of southern India that Never, the whole time I was there, even in the coldest part of the morning, never got below 74 degrees. So it was 74 degrees for 3 years there was the lowest temperature, usually in the 90s. And these people would work all on the hot days. And then when the flood happened, there was this flood line that you could see on the walls, and there was this slime in built-in cabinets, and just, there was like open sewers and just gross shit, right? And before me and my family could move in, we had to clean the place, and we were incapable of really doing it to the level, they used chemicals and shit. And so some of our neighbors had hired some of these people. So these people worked all day at this structure, slept there. They were like homeless people working there, carrying. They had a basket full of fucking bricks and carrying it on their heads and shit, right? And unimaginable lives. And they cleaned these places. And so we had 3 neighbors that really helped us get through, two other neighbors that helped us get through the floods. And one guy was a physicist who had lived in America. And he taught physics on the side. He tutored it. He made a bunch of money in America, and he was now tutoring it. He had a wife, a really nice wife, and a really cool kid. And he was just a really nice, sweet person. And he did the Sajmark meditation. And then there was another couple, a married couple. They were older. Their kids were grown. And they owned an eyeglass. They were doctors. They were optometrists. And they didn't do the Sajmark meditation, but they helped us. We came together as a group to get through the flood, and we really bonded. And they charged the physicist couple less money, and the doctors a little bit more money. And then because we were white Americans, they charged us even more money. And these people came in and scrubbed our apartment for 5 hours with fucking what I would assume were toxic chemicals to kill all the slime. And it wasn't totally better, but it was 90% better. Work that I wouldn't have been capable of doing. And my kids, probably the chemicals we were trying to clean for days. And they charged us the most. And it was like $50. They got $50 to scrub this place, this couple. And they were up all night, so they didn't get any sleep. Maybe they got a couple hours sleep before, in this girder area. And they went out and they fucking did this work, right? And I'm like, holy shit. I'm having this like realization of like how these people live. And, in America, we don't understand the level of lifestyle that we have. I mean, these people live in primitive conditions, and many of them, they just don't have access to, abstract thought isn't even a possibility because they don't have the fucking nutrition to get the brains to deliver abstract thought. And they don't have the capacity to even to understand that on levels because they don't, they're not uneducated. They don't learn to read and write. They don't have any kind of, their brains don't develop and all these things, right? And there's just fucking billions of people like that, right? Who are just, they're barely functioning. They're functioning like, they're closer to being like an animal than they are to a human being in terms of their capacities. They're underdeveloped, right? And so then there's the Sajmark system where the people who can do it are a small percentage of people. So it used to be they would start 40 people to get one good person. So 40 people who, a lot of people wouldn't even try it. So of the people who are willing to try to meditate, in India it's more, again, India, not every person is going to try to meditate, but it's more likely that they will, right? It's the percentage, maybe it's 10% of the population, but they're people who, meditation's like on the table for them, and they think about it, and, they have spiritual tendencies, and they grow up in a land where there's spirituality is just there in the culture and in the land. It's an ancient place, and it radiates spiritual energy, and there's people there who are born there. They choose to be born there so they can become spiritual, right? So there are people who are more able to meditate. In America, I don't know what percentage of people will actually sit and meditate for a half hour, an hour. Like I showed that video of that kid who said we could do a 5-second meditation. Like, well, yeah, that's, you can't even get into a meditative state in 5 seconds, right? Like, it's just not possible. And so, in terms of Americans who are really willing to meditate and have the capacity to do so, it's a small percentage. And of all those people who are willing to try it, 1 out of 40 would stay or be a good person, and they necessarily wouldn't stay there forever. And so, in terms of being elite on a spiritual level in the Sajmark system, which is, the best system that's existed in terms of connecting people to the divinity within them, it's a very small percentage of people. People who would be considered spiritually. Again, I don't like the word elite because, of course, it's been demonized. But people who are, in the small top percentage of spiritual people, like they're in the highest end of people who have a spiritual capacity. But it's a very small percentage, and many of these people were great saints and higher developed souls that are either famous or, people around Ramakrishna, who's a famous Indian saint, and around Krishna and these other the Mahabharata, and then we're around Jesus. I mean, it's the same souls. Like there's these higher developed souls, the people who are, the souls that are of a higher nature that come down time and time again and try to elevate humanity. And this system is populated with them. I had this experience that I was one of these people in the Mahabharata, Karna, and I had Jesus was in my dream, and I have the the impression that I was around Jesus when whatever that was, right, when he was alive. I've been through some of these things before. Like I'm aware of these experiences. This has developed later in life, and spirituality is the number one thing. It's the goal. Like you evolve up to be a spiritual person. I said that Master Chargy quote that the lowest part of the higher nature, which means the higher nature is your spiritual nature, is still higher than the highest part of your lower nature, which is your materialism. So the greatest material person, the most successful material person, is still lower than the worst spiritual person. The highest material successful person, and sometimes persons are both materially successful and spiritually successful. Usually they're not. They're mildly materially successful. But the ones who are really materialistically successful usually aren't very spiritual. Someone like who's and judging it by wealth or by academics or by, athletics or by acting, fame, and these things, right? Usually those people are totally focused on material success because they're highly competitive or they're in a highly competitive situation. So everything that they do is to obtain an elite level status on the material world. So they don't have any time and energy for their spiritual side. And spiritual people just have done this, been there, done that. Like spiritual people, I had a past life where I was an Asuric king, which is one of these kind of demonic bad kings, like an ancient life years and years and years ago, like hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so, I believe I had this life for various reasons, but, I have an aversion to that stuff, right? I just, because, it was a mistake, or you should learn from these experiences that this isn't why you're here, and you come back and you don't have any interest in it, right? So that's why I was saying, by material standards and by how you would define a successful person in America, I'm a complete failure. Like I'm all like I check all the boxes of of an underachieving failure, like in terms of my material success. But spiritually, I won the lottery, and and when I won it, I kept on, I invested in it, right? Like, so I won the spiritual lottery by doing the Sajmarg meditation. And this isn't like a self-esteem thing. It's like it's how I feel about everything. Like people will say, will make up like fake success or maximize some of their accomplishments to make themselves feel good. But like I am fully aware that I never really fit into the American system. And with the abilities that I have, I've underachieved, like just in terms of the materialistic system. And it bothered me, probably till the age of like 35 or whatever, maybe 40, I don't know. A little bit. Like it's just, it's how we define ourselves here. But certainly, since the YouTube channel took off and, the stuff happened, the debacle with Dodgy and these other things, well, let me get into that stuff. So, with all these people that do the meditation, the Sajmarg meditation, and of all the spiritual practices out there, because there are a lot of good ones, and there's religions and things, but this is like, by far the most vertical, the simplest system to connect people to the divinity within them. And there are a lot of higher developed souls who I've met. Like I could see these people are saints. Like there's, by every measurable standard, they're saintly people. And if you're around them, you're like, holy shit, these people are like, that's a person's like a fucking saint. If you could see them and observe them. and their capacity to serve other people and serve God, and how much of their time and energy they commit to it, their hospitality, their kindness, they exude spiritual tendencies and spiritual commitment. And there's a number of people, I've met some hundreds of them, and there's other people I don't know but know of who are, they're on a different level, they're higher level, right? Now, I knew from my experiences, like I had some unique experiences, and I had some other things that had happened where, I would be led to feel like in some ways I was special, even in this group of people, right? But in terms of behavior, like people say all the time to me, how do you call yourself spiritual? And I'm like, well, I don't. I do a spiritual practice. I don't say that I'm spiritual. Like, that's fucking goofy. And it's like, you can't say you're spiritual, but you can say you're doing a spiritual practice, that you're working to connect to the divinity within you, right? It's being spiritual, everybody's spiritual. Like, everyone has spirituality in them. Everyone has a soul. They have a capacity to connect to God. But most people aren't making any effort to do so. And I am making an effort to do so, right? Which puts me in a separate category, because most people aren't actively trying to make an effort. And so the difference between a person putting effort and a person not putting effort is, quite substantial, right? But there was some, level of like, well, I, would be special in the system. Like, there's some of that, like I said before, with my family. But the people that I met, a lot of them, and I thought they read the books, and, I think that some of them read some of the books. Like, I read all of them. Like, I was into it, and, I understand the system better than they do, because, there's this time where when we were traveling through, we went to Hyderabad when the third master of the system, Master Charji, died. And we were at this ashram, and everyone's like, oh, you got to meet this one preceptor. He's an older guy. He's in his 80s, and he's got stories about Babaji and Charji. And you should talk to him, right? He had experiences with the masters. And we started talking to him, and he just started to tell stories about things that were in the books, right? And I'm like, are you the only guy in this fucking village that read the books? And he wasn't even doing a good job of it. Like, I would do a much better job. Like, his memory wasn't there, and he probably didn't understand some of the things, maybe because of his age or whatever. He was 80, but like, he didn't do as good a job as I would have. It was his memory wasn't as accurate. He put details in there that weren't true, and he had things that were, sometimes he missed the point of the story. But he sat there for 2 hours just reciting things like, things I talk about here all the time, that I'm able to bring to people, stories about, that things, that teachings and stories and whatever. But, I kind of realized maybe people didn't read the books and they didn't put much effort in it. But in terms of their behavior, I'm like, oh, those people are way better. They're way nicer than me. They're way, So I thought I was, both maybe special, but also, kind of a dick, kind of an asshole, which is, it's hard to be, when you're working on your spiritual system, you also have to have, positive spiritual attitudes, and, you have to be a certain, there's behaviors that go along with it, right? So, I'm committed to this thing, and it's my big thing, but I'm not, I'm not goofy about it, and I'm just whatever. I'm kind of American about it, maybe a little bit punky about it, whatever. And some of these people are just really sweet, and they have better personalities that would reflect on their, their spiritual commitment and their effort that they put into it. That I thought, well, I'm glad that there's people like that are, better than me at this thing, that are more saintly, right? But then this thing with Daji hit, this guy who just absolutely shit the bed. So just a brief, like, I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes or less, because I've covered this in multiple videos, but Daji was the legitimate successor, the president of the Sajmarg organization, the Sri Ramchandra mission. And, he was blessed by the previous master, and then through these Whispers of the Brighter World messages, I had numerous experiences of him being a spiritual person, like somebody who was a cut above. So I was feeling pretty positive about him being the next iteration, and the previous masters vouched for him. So it was like a no-brainer to accept him, because, he was the legitimate, successor. And the Sajmarg system, this isn't like a pope. This is like somebody who has spiritual work done on them, so that and I saw the work being done because I was there in India when he was being prepared to be the person. And then he just went totally fucking stupid. I mean, he got retarded. His handling of things, he got corrupt. He owned pharmacies in New York City, and his kids started an online pharmacy with his pharmacy during COVID, and they got $170 million in investor money. Like he's, from they're making this a national. They're trying to make this a national company to deliver pharmaceutical pharmacy, your prescription to your home. Which when during COVID seemed like a no brainer, but the business was they inflated the value of the company to receive this money, and now they've absconded to India with all this money, and they are being indicted. At least one of them is being indicted or being investigated by the FCC or whatever it is, the Federal Trade Commission thing. And so there's so many fucking scandals and bullshit things he's done, and he's like retarded. I had some bad interactions. He's like stupid and doing stupid shit and just, very superficial and winning awards and, awards that you pay for. I mean, that's just total debacle. And the worst thing he's done is he shit all over his spiritual master, the guy that he was a disciple of. I mean, he's tried to cancel the guy's birthday, talks bad about him all the time. And in the disciple-master relationship, that never happens. And it's like your worst thing that you can do, like in terms of your spirituality, because when you're given a spiritual position, you always have to remember you're just a conduit, that you're not God, right? Like you're not, you always have somebody to look up to or somebody that, like this case, a previous master of the system, and they represent your soul. Like that's, you're merging into that source through that person's accomplishments, and their soul is like inside of you. Like their soul is part of your soul now. It's this whole thing that happens. And so you can never like start talking about how you did it or, you're better or, you're always looking up to your teacher, right? Your spiritual master, and they're ahead of you and they're transmitting back their findings. Like they're evolving and you're following them and you're this humility. But he just shit all over that whole idea. And the people don't know what to do with it. And so the reason I'm saying all this, there's a point to this. I just went for another walk with my wife and after lunch, and this is going on for a long time, but there's a whole point to this thing. And so I couldn't believe that these people, some of these people would, many of them, when they were in the third master's presence, Charji, and Charji would go back to India or they would go back to America or some country, or they would go back to their place in India, they'd visit the ashram and they'd be leaving him and they would weep because they loved him so much, right? Like he exuded this spiritual energy. I mean, this, people don't understand what it's like to be around a saint or a higher developed soul. Like they just exude love and spiritual energy, and their consciousness, it changes you. Like they pull you up, and they like can pull the best out of you, and because they're radiating this loving energy, it affects your heart, and you just love them, right? And these people would weep, and they talk about how much they loved him and all this shit. And as soon as Dodgy started to shit all over him, they're like, "Fuck that guy!" Right? Like I couldn't fucking believe it. I mean, a lot of them were like, just, I was like, "You're willing to sell? You know what's going on here?" And their lack of capacity to be truthers, their spiritual people are not always truthers, right? Their lack of capacity to be able to call something what it is, and not just go along with the herd. There's a herd mentality in India particularly, but many of these people were hippies and boomer hippies in Europe and America, and they can see what's going on. They can see this guy's a fucking complete disaster, and they just can't fucking do it. And when I realized that I could do this and they couldn't, I was like, holy fuck, like, is this what humanity has to offer, right? Like, is this, this is my kind of experience the other day. And I've been feeling this for a while. I've expressed it in different ways, but it just hit me the other day. Because, I suck, right? Like, I mean, in terms of, I'm not a self-esteem thing. I don't hate myself. I don't think, I just, in terms of being honest, like, an example of this is, because I've meditated 20,000 hours and I'm working constantly to connect to God and divinity. I don't talk about it because, I talk about it here, but, if you knew me in my personal life, I don't, things are going on inside me. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm thinking about God right now or whatever it is, right? I don't, Like it's not something, it's just a personal thing. And it just would be weird to talk about all the time. But I've been thinking about God and working to connect to God for over 31 years now. And then whatever I did in past lives. And, when you do that, your prayers, your connection to God is better than the average person. So when you pray and you pray for people, or you just, you connect people to God, there's a way to, you can do it through prayer, but you can just have the thought, well, here's my story. So my wife and I are going on a trip, and we're driving along, and I noticed there's a family. It might be a woman with a couple kids. I don't know if the husband was there. And their car's broken down. And, I've been through that kind of thing. And, maybe they didn't have like the best car. And I could see that the woman was kind of stressed. Like, we're just driving by quickly. But, I got the sense that she was like panicked. And I felt compassion. I felt bad for her. And so, I prayed in the sense of connecting her to God. And I just, I knew that whatever needed to happen would happen. Like she was, she was on the divine radar, and whatever needed to happen, was an opportunity for me to do service, right? And, the second master of the system, Babaji, would transmit to people. He would see people's faces like in bubbles. He didn't know who they were. They could be any person from around the world. And he would transmit them for some seconds a day. This movie, The Almighty Bruce, I think it's called, with Jim Carrey, where he becomes, the manifestation of God, and he starts hearing everybody's prayers. Like, that's a real thing. Like, when you become a higher level soul, you start hearing people's prayers, and you start, you're a vehicle for their connection to God, to help them connect to God when they're in need, and these things, right? And so, I talked about that story. And like the next time my wife and I were traveling, there's a car on the side of the road, and they were broken down. My wife, remembered me telling the story because she listened to my video. And she said, "You going to pray for them?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, my commitment is there sometime if I get inspired or whatever. I'm kind of beat down by the way this whole thing went with the Sizemore system. And, I went through a lot of things, a lot of goofy shit with the people there. And that's another thing. Like, I know that these people are, cream of the crop in terms of spiritual people that were lucky enough to be connected to the Sizemore system. But if you're around these people who are legitimately spiritual, they're not all that impressive, right? Like, a lot of times they're not trustworthy. Sometimes they're emotionally fucked up. A lot of times, especially in America, people who have spiritual tendencies are emotionally fucked up. People in Europe, like, it's just, you'd expect more from them, right? You expect more from the best, and then to bring this back to intelligence level, Candace Owens last night sent a tweet out that she was going to break the internet. And it was a video about Ben Shapiro using her old video clips that he possesses because she worked for him, and shitting all over her in some kind of way or whatever it is. And that, that whole fucking debacle. And I've been recently covering how this guy Mitch, that she said was his key witness to some kind of, important people in TPUSK being, there at this military base, why they were possibly putting some plan together to murder Charlie Kirk, like this whole bullshit thing. And the guy's so not credible. He's a joke. And Candace Owens herself said about these people who just lie and come out and misrepresent the truth, and how, if she did that, she'd be embarrassed and ashamed. Well, she should be embarrassed and ashamed. It's fucking brutal, right? And, she's basking in her millions of views and her popularity of her fucking podcast. And Jesus fucking Christ, like, it's dumb fucks. Like, she should lose her audience. Her audience should be able to see through all this stuff, just like the Trump supporters should see through him, just like the Biden supporters should have seen through him and the whole political system. And so you look at how dumb these motherfuckers are, like, just from our perspective. I mean, like, how oblivious they are. All the fucking sheeple in our lives and families that you can't talk to because they're so fucking retarded. They can't see the fucking the forest because of the trees. Whatever that saying is. They're just. I mean, it's so fucking bad. And like, if this channel and what I do here and whatever my intelligence level is in the top 90%. Like, if just based in IQ and other things, right? Like, if I'm one of the smartest, 10% of the population. I've talked about this in my book, The Choice, that there's 80% of the people, they're just like lost sheep. And there's 10% of the people who are kind of like evil, and there's, and they're leading humanity astray, and the other 10% who are, cut above, and they're leading humanity in the other direction, towards God and their higher nature. It's a battle of these two 10%, and the 80% sheep will go one way or another. Like if that's a, good example of the breakdown. Like if I'm in the top 10%, then we're fucked. And if I'm in the top 1% of the spiritual people, people who are working towards connecting to divinity, then humanity's fucked. Like there's certainly people who are better than me, but it isn't a lot of them, and the majority aren't. And so if that's the case, and unless there's some dramatic turnaround that I can't foresee, there just isn't enough talent out there. There just isn't enough people with spiritual abilities. If spirituality, which, I know is the only way to save the fucking planet and reverse, it's not really about saving the world. It's really about elevating human beings to a higher level so we're not so fucking shitty. Like, people suck right now. I just saw this trailer, and there's a guy, whatever his name is, you'll recognize the actor. But he comes from the future, and he's talking to people in the past going, you guys all know how bad it sucks. I'll show you that. That'll be the first thing I'll show you out the gate. You guys all know we're going the wrong fucking direction. And we do know. We all fucking know we're heading off the fucking cliff, right? And nobody's doing shit about it. Nobody's doing anything. Like, very few people are even preparing for it. People talk shit on the internet and whine, oh my God, this fucking bullshit. But very few people are doing anything to prevent it. Voting for Trump, telling you he's going to make America great again, is it fucking enough for you? That's enough, that fucking guy. Listening to Candace Owens, listening to fucking Erica Kirk, all these dumb motherfuckers out there. They have, you can't reach those people. Like, that's why I don't care how many viewers I get, as long as they're not fucking dumbasses, right? Like, I would rather have, like, no viewers than just dumb fucks. Like, I don't make content for dumb fucks. You can't help dumb fucks, right? What I'm talking about, and I'm not saying that because they're choosing to be the way they are. I'm saying that you cannot elevate them. They cannot elevate themselves. There is, half the population or more, and it's probably, I would say at least 80% of the population, if not 90% of the population, cannot pull themselves out of this abyss. They can't do anything to help. They can't change, and they just don't have the capacity. It's like asking, it's when you talk to your dogs and they're just looking at you, lovingly, but they don't fuck you're saying, right? Because they want to know maybe, but they just, they just don't get it. Like, no matter what you say, they're not understanding English, and they don't have the capacity to do it. They have the intelligence of a 5-year-old kid. It's like when you're talking to your kids and they just don't fucking get it, right? I was in this treatment center, and there was this kid, let's say his name was Joseph or Joey or something like that. That was actually his name. But he had been in the treatment center for a long time, and he was definitely gay, but he's like 10 years old, probably didn't know it yet. And he had a weird-ass mom or aunt that looked like, if you ever seen the Pink Floyd The Wall album cover, the guy had a bad relationship with his mom. And his mom, the cartoon figure of his mom, she was just like, she looked like an overweight Bride of Frankenstein. And that's what this guy's aunt looked like. But she was a new age person, into like weird witchcraft and shit like that. And it's his last day. The kid had been there for 5 years. And it's his last day, and he's crying, and he's leaving, and I don't want him to get fucking restrained and melt down. Sometimes these kids, when their lives are changing. He's been in this treatment center for 5 years. He's now going to live with his crazy ass aunt, who's a new age person, and his kid's really, a treatment center kid who was really violently sexually abused by his parents, and now he's going to live with his crazy aunt. And I'm trying to keep him, like, I'm giving him a pep talk, and I'm like, this is your last day. You've been here a while. You want to go out on a high note, like, we could just hold it together. And he just smiles at me, right? He's crying and he smiles at me. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm getting through to the kid. And he goes, I'm eating my snots. I'm eating my snots. He's like licking his fucking under his nose, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And like, I experienced that quite a bit here. This is when I see the comment section, and I've banned so many dumb fucks, and they keep on coming back, and I see what people say in the news and how, all the crappy content out there that people are watching. And, if I'm like in the some kind of upper echelon, like it's just, we're fucked then, right? Like, you always hope there are people better than you. Like I say this all the time. I would hope that all the people listening to this, especially the younger people, would go farther spiritually than I am. Like that's, should be everybody's wish. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because wouldn't it be great if you lived in the world where you were the worst fucking person? Like, like wouldn't the world be wonderful if you were the worst fucking one? But unfortunately, that's not the case. And, this is what we're dealing with. And it kind of just hit me, and I thought I would put it into this narrative. All right, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so I went out and did some farm work. I want to wrap this thing up, but I think I must add something here. I'm already 119 minutes in, so I might as well complete this, whatever this is here. And so, I don't want to sound hopeless about humanity. I'm just sounding realistic about where we are right now, right? Like sometimes in life, if you want to achieve a goal and you're deluding yourself, you're going to reach that goal. It's a goal that you can't achieve, or it's a lot farther off than you think, and you're not trying hard enough, and you're not putting enough effort into it, and you're not changing and adapting enough to become what you need to become to achieve that goal, right? I often tell this story about how, I haven't often, but I've told it a few times. And, what this is, when I became a preceptor in the Sajmark system, I was given, I bought these preceptor books. One was a training on how to do the sittings, spiritual techniques, things like that. And the other one was about character development and the kind of person you needed to be this kind of, conduit for God, right? And so I was really excited about like reading these books because it was like next level information that you weren't going to get in most of the other literature, was something on a higher level. And I was so passionate about the literature, and I learned so much about spirituality and life and, so many different things through the other books in the system. And so I was like pretty pumped to read these books. So I read the one about techniques, and, I was working as a preceptor, starting to learn how to do these sittings. You're working on an abstract level. You're working with your mind in a way that, would be almost considered imaginary, right? Like where you're going inside someone's internal system and you're reading their internal condition, and you're coming up with strategies on how to clean the person's heart, and then this energy flows through you, this transmission. And so like I was pumped about that, and I really enjoyed that. I got these audio tapes, and I listened to them. I had a 2-hour commute either way to work, so a 4-hour commute, both ways. And I was, living in New Mexico, so I listened to these tapes. And the second one was this book about character qualities, and I really was into it. And I read it, and I'm like, when people talk about spiritual people, when you think about being a spiritual person, it's like the way people are fake nice. When you see spiritual people, they put on a priest, collar, priest outfit, or they shave their heads and they're a monk. And, India, they wear these saffron robes. Across the globe, shaman, they dress a little bit differently. And everybody goes, oh, that's a spiritual person by the dress, the outfit they wear. And they talk to you in a spiritual way. There's these people in New Mexico that I was learning about. One of them was a woman from Tennessee, and she went to India, and somebody said to her, "You are that," and she meditated on that, and she came back and became a guru, and she would hold court, and people would go see her, and I saw a few videos of her. I think I saw her once, and it was all performative. I mean, she's probably somewhat spiritual, but mostly it was just putting on an act. And these spiritual gurus, these holy people, and they talk in a certain way, and and they might embrace certain types of diets and behaviors, but it's all it's all kind of fake. It's just performative for the most part, right? They really haven't moved that far spiritually. They're just kind of playing a part. And then you'll find religious people who really embrace their religion, and they're really into it. There might be a pastor, or there might be just a person there, at your church or whatever, religion you practice, wherever you are in the world. And then you find out about the person's life, and they have shitty characters, or cheating people. They're having sex or gay sex, something like this. They're they're not who they claim to be, but they pretend, right? And there's this level, but they act a certain way, and they're really nice and they help people, and I mean, all those things, and that's what you think about, like kindness and the way you treat other people, being respectful, humble. There's all these qualities that are there. But that's not what it is in Sajmarg. In Sajmarg, it's 100% commitment. Like your thought process, your like the way I used to daydream a lot, for example, or watch TV, or just not focus on God. Just do whatever do whatever you do. Where your mind just drifts, and when you're eating, you're enjoying your food, and you're doing whatever you're doing. Right, you're indulging in things, and you're just enjoying your material life. And the Sajmarg, it's when you reach the ultimate goal, 100% of your commitment is to serving God. Like every time you eat, every time you take a breath, you're doing it so that you can be of service to God. Like everything that you do, the way that you live your life is so that you can better serve God. And then you think about God constantly and nothing else. You don't indulge in any kind of materialistic behavior. You don't do this right off the bat, but you grow into it. And I was just like, fucking no way, right? Like when I read this, and I'm making it more simple here. But when I read it, I was like, there's no fucking way, right? There's just, I'm not, I just can't, I don't think this is, for where I was at the time, I'm like, this is impossible. I mean, I'm not as overwhelmed by the idea now that I'm older. As you get older, you get tired of all the bullshit anyway. So, it's not as hard to spend your time working for God. But, it's, the motivation isn't there as well either. You don't have the enthusiasm because, you've just been beat down by life or whatever. So I'm saying this is that when you talk to a Christian and they tell you what they think they have to do to get into heaven, and you talk to most religious people and they say, well, you do this thing or do that, or you say this mantra, you do this thing, and and you go to this guru, you go to this priest, and you go to confession, whatever, and they have these pretty lame ideas of what it takes to be a spiritual person, and what it is to be on your spiritual path, and what it is to evolve, into your next, to get free of your earthly bondage, be liberated from your succession of lives and past lives. And they have a remedial idea of how spirituality works. And I mean, all the things I talk about here. And if you talk to the average person about what needs to happen, in terms of fixing the system, I mean, all these people thought Joe Biden could do it. And then all these other people thought Donald Trump could do it, right? Like, that's how fucking dumb they are. That's how, lame they are in their own accountability. And they think pretty much everyone can just go about their lives, their American lives, and not change anything, not change your lifestyle, not change your attitude. I mean, they see everyone's going in the wrong direction. I shot that clip already of this movie I talked about, and I got that coming up after this. And, they can see what's happening. The world's going fucking to shit, and each generation's getting worse. And they don't think they have to change drastically, that there needs to be drastic fucking changes and an evolutionary type situation, right? Like, most people are oblivious to what has to happen. Like, when they're talking about in the Whispers of the Brighter World, these channeled messages, they're talking about how we have to go through a genetic transformation and evolve, and all this like junk DNA that we have, so-called junk DNA, latent potential and unrealized potential, and we have to change into a whole different species. Like, we have to go from where we are now, to something more evolved, like something on a higher level of evolution, like beyond what human beings are now, with a capacity for, extra sensory perception, these things, telepathy. I'm watching this show called The Institute, and it's a Stephen King movie, and I thought it was going to be shitty TV show, and I recorded it, and I thought my wife and I might watch it, and I was like, it looked pretty shitty, and then I was like, I might as well just watch a few episodes or watch an episode and delete it. Like, I didn't think it was going to be good. And it's really actually quite good, and it's got a lot of Illuminati shit in there, a lot of controller stuff. But they have these kids who are, they're either, they either can move things with their minds, slightly, or they're, they can read people's minds. And this institute has taken these kids and using their powers, like, for example, to take down an airplane and like other shit, right? This is not really spoiler alert stuff, but it's, kind of, it's the basic premise of the show. But the way these kids are higher developed kids who are, they're evolving, they're, evolving in their abilities. Instead of
embracing these kids, and instead of basing their system to serve these kids, they use these kids who are much higher developed than they are. These fucking controlling pieces of shit. They use their powers for their shitty world domination bullshit, right? Which is just how it is. And so there's going to have to be like an evolution, in like a human evolution. Like people are going to have to jump. And I don't know where the people who have no capacity for abstract thought fall in all this. I mean, there was a Whispers of the Brighter World message that was about how not only people are going to evolve, but animals. Let me see if I can find that one. Okay, so I've been reading a bunch about this genetic mutation. So I thought I would read this because, it's kind of the point of this whole thing. Let me find the page. All right, so this is from one called, this is from Wednesday, November 20th, 2002. I'm going to start in the beginning here, or the middle. Man's molecular structure will need to change. A related mutation will allow him to approach facts in a more esoteric way. He can only progress in terms of knowledge by dint of it. This mutation will be painful but necessary for the future of the entire humanity. It cannot continue in this escalation, which leads it towards its destructive rather than towards salvation. You who are on the path, may your thoughts be positive concerning the future of the world. Be missioned ones convinced of this future upliftment. We are working towards that end. Babaji. And this one here, yes, a new race is being born. This is Saturday, May 19th, 2001, 8 a.m. Yes, a new race is being born. It is strong and will not let itself be corrupted. It will need a lot more time to impose itself before the genetic mutation is completed. This will take place by degrees at its own pace before a new mankind really appears all over the surface of the earth. It is enormous work, but it will be achieved as foreseen. We already have some of these beings in the mission. They are tomorrow's officers in charge, these indigo or blue children as you call them. Not only will they have a higher intellect with the that they will use for the good of man, but they will also be characterized by a very broad spiritual openness. They will mark future times in a way that you cannot imagine. This poor planet is the prey of completely mad beings, satisfying their need for power and domination. The lure of gain makes them sacrifice the most elementary laws of respect for the created world. They take irrational risks knowing what they are exposing the world to. Do they believe they are immortal? They are ransacking, poisoning, destroying the ecosystem, and the common run of people does not know all of it. Fortunately for their peace of mind, while undergoing the disastrous effects of errors mainly accumulated over the last century, people in this transitional period can find consolation in imagining these future times where this poor earth will be able to lick its wounds caused by the men and cataclysms created by their errors. Babaji. So there's that one. Okay, so I found the one here. I think there might be more than one that says this. There's 20,000 of these, and I only have some of them saved. But all the ones that would apply to this. Anyway, this one is from Tuesday, August 6, 2013. Humanity needs to realign itself. There's some kind of weird typo. Humanity needs to realign itself with respect to the axis essential for its growth. A major step will be taken towards a general evolution, not only on the human plane, but also in various other kingdoms that shape this planet. Each planet has its prerogatives, although they cannot escape human beings of today. In the distant future, not only will they become aware of and comply with the divine laws, but also have the greatest respect for all of creation. Then that which some beings are deeming here below will come about. The acceptance of life in its many and varied forms. Evolution will occur on a scale that human beings will be stunned in the face of such changes. It is good for all to consider such a mutation. Stagnation is only temporary. All will come to pass in due time, as it is planned, the evolutionary cycle. It's up to each one to act in the best that under our blessings, Babaji. And so that that's I think there's another one, but basically saying that all life on planet Earth is going to rise to a higher level of consciousness. Plant life and animal life. There's another one that's very specific about it. Let me see if I can find that one. All right, I can't find it. So, but it said something about certain species would be pulled up as well with human beings. But there's a lot of things that got to happen for that. People aren't willingly going along with this. People aren't actively pursuing their own evolution, and the pain of a genetic mutation and the spiritual stuff that goes along with it is not. I mean, it's not going to be easy. Like you look at a frog or a butterfly or something that metamorphosizes. It's not, it's not that easy, and it can happen. And the need for it is there. Like we all see the need, right? We see that there needs to be some sort of change here, but very few people are willing to do anything for themselves. They're expecting someone else to do more. When these Whispers of the Brighter World came out, I recently released the Prophecies. And these came out in 2005, 2006. My family and I were living near Virginia Tech. It was right when the shooting had just happened there. Remember that whole thing. And there's a young Indian Abhyasi, practitioner. Abhyasi means aspirant. Someone who does the Sajmark system. And he would book a room, and preceptors would come down from D.C. or come up from North Carolina, would drive 4 hours because we didn't have a preceptor there, and they would give the group meditation like once a month. So, usually it'd be once a week, but there was no preceptor. And he would rent a room there, and we could meditate there with or without a preceptor and all come together. There was a family that lived in Blacksburg and a few other people. And so he would get a room because he was a student at the university, smart kid. He was studying the movement of water, which I always had a fascination with. And I had a couple good conversations with him. And these prophecies of the Whispers of the Brighter World came up. And he said, he didn't believe in them because he said that the people running the world were so smart that they would figure something out and prevent these things from happening, right? And I'm like, I'm already into the truther stuff. And I'm older than this guy and this kid, and plus he's from India, and they don't have, they don't have the same resistance with authority that we have. Like they don't question authority. There's a very hierarchical system, very much like in China in their way, where everyone plays a cog in the wheel. They're not so much stress on individuality, and they have this reverence for elders and things. But I'm like, are you shitting me, right? Like, why would you trust the people that run the planet more than you would trust Babaji, in spirit form, who's giving these messages, right? And, I realize that most people think that way. They think that there are people out there running the system that are just good people, smart people, and they'll figure out a way and solve all these problems, but they're not going to be solved, right? They're, problems that are just getting worse, and people are getting lamer and, weaker and psychologically more fragile and crazier and just less and less, what we're designed to be. We're de-evolving. We're going into idiocracy. And so, what people need to be able to embrace in terms of their own, beyond their own personal things and worries and, about, what you're going to eat next and, what you're going to do with your free time and you have enough money for this or, what's going to happen to you in the future and all the worries that people have. But in terms of just changing and adapting, people aren't up for it. So there's going to have to be shit that happens to pull this out of people. Like there's going to have to be a motivation that we don't have yet. Human beings do not have the motivation to embrace their higher nature. And so that has to come some way, shape, or form. And I hope it does. We'll see. I have faith and belief in these Whispers of Brighter World messages, but I also have this realistic perspective of where humanity's at. And, where we are at personally and what we need to do to achieve a goal. And for most of us, it's far beyond what we're willing to embrace and commit to and endure. Anyways, let me wrap this one up now and move on to the other stuff. So I'm going to come back to this point right here. So this movie's called Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. I saw the trailer today. And it totally speaks to everything I'm saying. So it's about how something happens with people's phones and it looks like it's going to be a solution. But when they do it, it causes, it's destruction of the world. This guy's from the future, and he's coming from a post-apocalyptic time. He's kicking everybody's cell phones off of their table. He's telling all these people that there's enough in the room to save the world. And so then he says this to them. Then he says this to them.
Somewhere inside of you, you know the way things are, the way we're heading.
Yeah, like people know that, right? That's true.
The way people are with each other.
Yeah, we know that too.
You know the world's going to shit.
You know the world's going to shit, right? And this is my whole voiceover that I just did, and so this is the clip that I saw. I don't know if there's more to it. They copyright these fucking things.
Means a damn is you people choosing to come along for this ride.
Yeah, so all right. So I look forward to seeing this movie when it comes out, whenever. I'm not going to movie theater, so when it comes to streaming service. But, this is what I'm talking about. People fucking know. Like, we all fucking know we're going off the fucking cliff. Almost everybody fucking knows. And so, what are people doing? Like, there's one solution, which is people have to get better. And the way to do that is connect to God and embrace your higher nature. You have to become like a saint-like person. You have to be on the level of Jesus or beyond, right? Like Jesus was on the first rung of spirituality. And people think about him as being a god, right? So, like, think about how much farther there is to go. And humanity just isn't fucking willing to do it. Anyways, let's move on to the shooting thing. Actually, there's a little bit more here.
Because you see the writing on the wall.
There's the evolutionary.
And you're ready to wake up and do something about it.
Yeah, so, we'll see. Okay, so today's still Thursday, January 8th. I'm just starting to hear about or get into this thing with the ice people. My wife just sent me a whole bunch of clips that she had seen, I guess last night or this morning. I was busy doing the long voiceover you heard and these other things, working outside. And so here's the first piece.
Really, you fucking punk? That's what you're gonna fucking do?
What?
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 What? Do you know what
Back
the fuck
up.
is that is for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
You're gonna push me? What is that for?
Back up.
What was that
I don't
for?
give a fuck.
You don't give a fuck about
Back
her?
up. Bro.
This is why we're here.
Back up.
This is why we're here.
Okay, so they put out some candles here for the woman. That looks kind of fake, right? It looks kind of contrived. This guy here looks like a...
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
just doesn't, I don't know. Like, everything seems fake to me. I don't know. Does that look fake to you guys? So that's the first thing. I saw something on CNN with the shooting, and, I have thoughts about the whole thing, and I'll mention them as we go through. So that's video number one. Actually, is he the only protester? Where's everyone else?
Really, you fucking punk? That's what
So they're like fake candles.
you're gonna fucking do?
What?
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 What? Do you know what
Back
the fuck
up.
is that is for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
What is that for?
Back up.
You're gonna push me? What is that for?
Back up.
What was that
I don't
for?
give a fuck.
You don't give a fuck about
Back
her?
up. Bro.
This is why we're here.
Back up.
This is why we're here.
So where's everyone else? There's somebody filming this. So I would assume this is to create some sort of outrage, right? You got one sort of, fake hippie there, and three, I don't know, wannabe ICE agents, and a guy with a camera. Like, where's everybody else? Where's that? What's the context? Is that the whole video? Is there anything more on this? So I think they're just trying to get people angry and whatever it is. Of course, there's D Vance's goofy response. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so here they are in the streets of Minneapolis. Of course, there's big things going on with Walls, Tim Walls in Minnesota. Like, there's weird shit there. I think there's and so the woman pulls off, and this guy starts to fire at the car. And, I guess he did a direct headshot here. Or not. It just looks like that. I mean, I don't think there's any video of you can see her getting shot, like the bullets going into her head. Is there anything like that? Because, he could be firing blanks, right? I mean, there's bullet holes in the window, and that's whatever it is, but that could have been there before. Or he could just be firing past her. Like, this is, I don't know if people have her slumped out dead. Is there any videos on that? So, like, I don't know what all the videos are out there. But I do know that they are now showing you more graphics shit, right? So first the Charlie Kirk shooting. Well, first there was Luigi Mangione, where you see the guy shooting the guy on the street. Before there was like one video where this guy, I think it was in Roanoke, Virginia. It was definitely in Roanoke, where this guy went up to a reporter and shot her, and that was a little bit like, a lot of these things are just hearsay, right? You had the Trump fake assassination attempt where he's bleeding from the ear. That's where you see, there's blood, and he's been shot, in a WW fake way, and that thing. And then you had the Luigi Mangione thing, and then you have Charlie Kirk gushing blood from the neck, and that was very graphic. And now you have a ICE agent, all masked up, firing into a car. A suburban white woman, right? So in Minneapolis, who's running away from him or doing whatever she's doing. And I think that you have to look at it in terms of their playbook. Let's go to the next video. So the headline to this video was, new video shows the officer was acting in self-defense. And so that he was being hit here, like this is that angle. But, like, this isn't self-defense because the car's already by him, right? Like, I mean, he doesn't have to shoot. Like, it's a matter of whether this person fleeing the sun, whether that's appropriate policing. If you're driving by a cop and the cop can just start shooting right in, like execution style, right into your fucking head, right? Like fucking, we'll get back to the whole thing I was saying before. But that's, they're trying to make it sound like he was being run over and the guy had been run over before, and that, he's been hit by a car before. So this time he's like, I'm not taking that shit lying down. And so the next time someone tries to run over me, I'm going to fucking shoot him in the fucking head, right? And so let's move forward here. So this is the bullet hole here, where, one of them where, he's allegedly shot. Now, this would have not probably maybe hit her. I don't know. Where's the steering wheel? Yeah, I guess there. So there's that.
On Wednesday, in Minneapolis, a federal agent fatally shot a motorist, 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Trump.
Okay, so we don't see her there. Like, they're trying to revive her, but she's probably like the fucking bullet hole in her head. Jesus fuck Christ. So back to what I was saying. If you're reading from their playbook, right? I'm going to go through the rest of these video clips here. If you're thinking about their playbook, and you're not thinking this about the woman, right? You're not thinking about the woman or the ICE agent. You're thinking about the content, like that you're seeing. This is something that people miss, right? You're seeing this content for a reason. So you had, the thing with Trump, you had the thing with Luigi Mangione, and then you had, the Charlie Kirk thing, and now you have this woman. And so one of the things they're getting you used to seeing is people being shot, right? They're conditioned to seeing people being shot on the streets, being either assassinated or being shot by ICE, in this case, police. And so, like, they're showing graphic images. Where before you were heard about the thing. Somebody shot somebody at a church, or you hear about the story and you have to leave it up to your imagination. They're not doing that, right? You're also seeing, in this case, ICE agents just fucking bullying people. I got a video clip coming up where they're harassing people. Wearing black masks so you can't see them. I mean, it's intimidating. And that they're, going up to these cars. This woman, was some suburban woman who was an American citizen. And why are they harassing her? What's going on there? What's all that stuff? And so how do you receive that as a person? And D Vance comes out and says, she was just defending herself. The bitch fucking deserved it, right? And we'll get to that in a bit. And so when all those things are in play, then you have a reaction. And so, they've been getting they've been grooming you for martial law for years. I talked about this, grooming as a behavior. where there's more and more invasive, in this case, graphic images of you seeing, like, American citizens just getting popped on the street, right? Whether it be Charlie Kirk, with his thing, and then Luigi Mangione, and, to some degree Trump, and then now this woman. So they're getting used to seeing people just getting shot. There's going to be riots and protests. D Vance is just going to incite rage. The right wing and Fox is covering this. I mean, when I first looked at this morning, MSNBC had, MS Now had probably 50 videos up already. I didn't even look at CNN. I turned on the news. CNN was saying 2 more people had been shot in Portland. I don't even know what that was about. I don't know if that's in the past. And Fox News was showing J.D. Vance's video and saying that the media is making a big deal about this. So it's there causing division. It also, Trump is doing everything in his power to avoid the Epstein shit. They're delaying things, and I mean, they keep on throwing fucking Charlie Kirk assassination and the invasion of Venezuela and fucking world, war with Venezuela and all this other shit, and now this. They're doing everything in their power to, like, just keep big events up. And they would rather probably have this than talking about Venezuela, and they'd rather have Venezuela than talk about Jeffrey Epstein. And so, but mostly this is about grooming people for a new deal that you're not going to like.
Administration officials said these were, quote, defensive shots fired because the officer was being run over.
And a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over.
But our analysis
The woman attacked them.
of bystander footage, filmed from different angles, appears to show the agent was not in the path of the victim's SUV when he fired 3 shots at close range. Here's how events unfolded. Moments before the shooting, the victim's maroon SUV is stopped in the middle of the street. Multiple unmarked federal vehicles are idling nearby. Secretary Noem alleged the motorist, quote, was blocking the officers in.
Why was the motorist doing that? Why was the motorist in this kind of position?
Bystanders are blowing whistles and yelling at federal agents.
Go home to Texas!
Then, federal vehicles start moving toward the maroon SUV, with sirens and lights blaring.
Was she protesting? Was this some part of a protest?
A federal agent films the scene on his phone. The driver rolls forward slightly, turning left, then stops and waves for others to go ahead. 2 agents exit this silver pickup and walk toward the vehicle. Moments later, shots are fired. Let's look at the scene again more closely. This is the agent who shoots the driver. He walks around the car filming and disappears from view. Other agents pull up and order the driver to exit her vehicle. One of them grabs at the door handle and...
So again, get out of the fucking car. This is, when you're seeing this isn't like appropriate police fucking procedure, right? These aren't trained police people. They have nothing to do with American citizens, right? They're not trained to police American citizens. They're not trained for, military action. They're supposed to be trained for immigration shit, right? And so they're yelling, get out of the car, like, you're talking to someone who doesn't have any civil rights, because, they would be doing this to illegal non-U.S. citizens who are in our country illegally, right? So they would be approaching somebody like that. So this is an American citizen. I don't know if she's protesting. I don't know what her deal was and why she's doing what she's doing here. But, like, get out of the fucking car. She's not approaching the person with any sense of, you don't know if you're dealing with some older person who's panicked or something, or, who knows what's going on here. Like, if she's doing this as a protest, anyways, you can't do this. Like, that's just not appropriate. And this is going to trigger everybody. It's triggered the shit out of the left. I think it's triggering people on the right. And, of course, this is also grooming people for martial law that's coming.
Reaches inside. The SUV reverses, then turns right, apparently attempting to leave. At the same time, the agent filming crosses toward the left of the vehicle and grabs his gun. He opens fire on the motorist and continues shooting as she drives past. The moment the agent fires, he is standing here, to the left of the SUV, and the wheels are pointing to the right, away from the agent. This appears to conflict with allegations that the SUV was...
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, you get the idea. So, a few more things here.
She was scared. She wasn't trying to comply. I mean, she was trying to block traffic, and then they got aggressive, and she was scared, and she started to drive off. She was trying to comply with what they said to get out of here, and then they were saying... Then they were trying to pull her out of the car, and that's when she got scared and tried to drive away. She got shot, and then immediately her foot went on the gas. She was I think she was already dead, but her foot hit the gas. She drove off maybe 100 feet and then hit the telephone pole and hit some cars, and then she was just slumped in her vehicle. And they wouldn't let anybody near her. They had their guns out and were saying, "Stay back, stay back, stay back." And we
Sun's out, guns out.
have a neighbor who was, he's a physician, and he was yelling, "I'm a physician. Can I please administer CPR? Can I check her vitals? Check her vitals. Can I please get through?" And they were like, "No, absolutely." They said, "No, shut up. We don't care. We have our own medics on their way." And then it was like 15 minutes before the EMS truck got here, and the EMS couldn't get their vehicle through, so they arrived on foot. They couldn't get through because of the ICE vehicles, to be clear. So they came through on foot. It was maybe 5 EMS people, and they checked her out for maybe 5 minutes, and then they carried her body like a fucking sack of potatoes. They didn't even have a stretcher.
Sack of potatoes. Jeez. It's like a sack of potatoes.
They carried her out to the corner where they took her away.
Okay, so we'll get to D Vance here in a second. I have this video clip. This is I pulled up this morning. I just randomly did it. It's the same woman, which is always suspicious when they have the same people making the rounds, right? She's very well spoken, very comfortable in front of the camera, good interview skills. You know, when they roll out these same people.
A witness to that incident today, and she joins me now. Emily, I first just want to say I am...
So my wife sent me these videos I just showed you, and I had already pulled this one up, and I was wondering if it was the same woman, and it is. That's always some kind of a red flag when they roll out the same people, like at these events, these crises, and there's the same people, and they go on every show, and then Fox News will have their people, you know, whatever. But they have these, you know, these people, and they're some of them are better than others, but she's very, you know, comfortable doing interviews and things.
So sorry that you had to watch that today, and thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us tonight. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Fuck. What kind of delay you got going there, bro?
Can you tell me what first brought you out of your house to look at this, or were you even in your house when you first became aware of what was happening?
I was in my house. I was starting my breakfast, and I didn't have shoes on, but I heard the ice whistles. My community is pretty organized around ice raids, so when they see them happening, people gather and blow whistles to alert the community. People come out, and so the whistles did their job. I came out onto my
or did they? Right?
Porch, and there was a woman who was a protester. She was blocking traffic with her car. She was parked perpendicularly, so the like convoy that was probably.
So like I guess you can't do that anymore, right? Is that there?
6 or 7 ICE vehicles. So she had blocked the traffic, so they couldn't get through. And ICE was screaming at her to move, move, move. And then they got really aggressive and went over to her driver's side.
So, so you get the idea. This woman is making the rounds. I'm sure she's probably also on a MSN, but she's probably on a CNN video as well, right? Okay, so Donald J. Trump out here buying up countries like Yemen and Prime Day. United States has reached a deal to purchase Greenland. Marco Rubio working out the details. Canada, Greenland, Panama Canal. Proceed to checkout. My wife sent me this with unrelated. Here, I think this is they go into a school here. right, so shit's going south, right? Like fucking, they're getting used to, like, these ICE agents are not police. They're not military. They look like they're all thugs. I mean, that guy said, I don't give a fuck to that other guy, right? Like, they're just like, it's just like they're a biker gang out there beating the shit out of people, ripping people out of cars. They're not. And Trump and Kristi Noem and D Vance are like, yeah, fuck you. These guys are, they're heroes. So this is the kind of message they're sending, right? You can't protest, you can't, and protests don't work, and I don't know what the fuck, there's layers to this thing. But, I mean, they're grooming you and getting you ready for when this is just the normal thing, where you have to go through checkpoints and people are, pointing guns at you all the time and yelling at you and shit like that. And, it's, you're getting Americans accustomed to be just disrespected and manhandled and, like all the things I've talked about this with TSA at the airport, right? So first they had you just had to go through scans, and you would go through a security checkpoint, and then they had the shoe bomber, and you now had to take off your shoes. Remember, I don't even know if they make you do that anymore, but you take off your shoes, you put them in a bucket because some guy put a bomb in the shoe. So now they had to X-ray your shoes, right, specifically, and then there was the big event, July, was it 7th or 24th or something, in England, where they had liquids and they were smuggling in explosives. I mean, this was the story, in these suitcases. So you no longer could bring liquids with you. They had to go through your shit, and they were then going through your suitcases as well, where they were opening up your suitcases and going through and touching your clothes and, getting into your personal property. And then there was the underwear bomber, which meant that they had to put in these naked body scanners or frisk you. So now they're getting more and more invasive. This is grooming, right? Where they're getting used to you're getting used to all these types of behaviors. So you're getting used to more ever expanding abusive behaviors, invasive behaviors. That's how grooming works. So the caption to this video was, you can't run people over unless you're an ICE agent. And here's an ICE agent running somebody over in Minnesota, I guess. So there's that. I don't know if this is true or not. These are just, look at this fucking clown.
When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this.
Oh, those fucking legacy media people with their bullshit, not wanting you to open fire on an American citizen in the middle of a fucking suburb.
Attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people.
Exactly. The way that woman blocked that fucking intersection and tried to run over that motherfucker. I mean, Jesus Christ, they should have opened fire on the whole neighborhood. I mean, I can't believe they just stopped with her.
The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single.
Oh my God, exactly. This fucking poor law enforcement agents, right? So this is where they're going with this. They're taking a fuck you approach, right? And this is. I mean, they know they're gonna create outrage. There's certainly outrage. There's I covered this in my long voiceover today. There's just a lot of dumb fucks out on both sides, right? And they're easily wound up. There's going to be all kinds of protests now. The liberals have no answer for this. They're going to have the midterm elections. I mean, they're trying to create chaos and, all these ways that this is going south. And it's also, remember when you walked into a grocery store and everybody was wearing masks? It was like you were in one of these post-apocalyptic movies where there's a virus. There had been all these movies that, there's viruses, some kind of deadly zombie virus or something. And everyone's wearing masks in those movies. And it was like this surreal moment where, it's like it made you panic. You couldn't breathe with your own mask on and seeing other people with masks in your store. And, when the stores were being, originally when there was a shutdown and people were like, you went through all the canned goods and toilet paper were bought out and all that shit, right? Seeing empty shelves in the stores, and it makes you panic, right? It's like, they're getting you used to, that you're not going to have everything that you always, like your grocery stores aren't always going to be full, and these things. Remember, there was no gas for a while because some refinery got hacked, and I was, my wife and I were going on a trip, and we were in one of the states. It was like Tennessee or North Carolina where there were shortages of gas, and there's some dude. And he had those like very flimsy, almost clear garbage bags, like the worst garbage bags, and he was filling gasoline into garbage bags, like fucking. And I don't even know how he's gonna. And he was just in the back of his car. He was fucking filling it up and like just all this shit. So, like this is Panic 101, and they're just taking a fuck you approach. So, I mean, I can't imagine this isn't staged in some way.
Day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about...
Oh, he was sensitive? Oh, he seemed real sensitive when he was fucking popping that woman in her dome. Like, Jesus Christ. He seems so sensitive. Just like you, JD, you're so sensitive, bro, with your fucking eye makeup and your women-like features. Like, like Jesus Christ, he was pretty sensitive. This guy, so sensitive.
Day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out.
So, so like, what's the protocol? Like, what are the rules of engagement for a U.S. citizen driving their car when you could easily get out of the fucking way, right? Like he didn't, he could have got out of the way. And now she's protesting, right? She's blocking them, whatever the fuck. I don't endorse that behavior. I don't know what these fucking liberals are doing out there. But these liberals, they're unarmed, right? They don't believe in fucking guns, and they're out there with fucking whistles. And you got these bikers going in there, fucking, knocking heads, cracking heads. I mean, this is what are the rules? Like, what can these guys do? They could just, if you're driving your car and they feel like there's a possibility that car might graze them, they can just fire into the car. And, what if she had, like, kids in there? What if she had, like, of course, she probably wouldn't be doing this if she had kids, but she has kids. And so, what are the rules here, bro? Right? So this is what I'm saying. They're like, this is a fuck you time. They're just like, fuck you guys. This is an American citizen, and, this is how we're treating you. And, this guy's not going to be fired. This guy's going to have his job. It's like, the liberals are going to go ape shit. I mean, think about how... And what are the future events that you're going to start seeing?
Is that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using...
This feeds into the Charlie Kirk thing, right? And, they'll cover this at TPUSK, and this idea that these violent left-wing radicals with their fucking whistles and their fucking candles and their hippie fucking shit,
domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers.
All right, this guy's just such a little bitch, right? But anyways, this looks intentional. I don't want to call it fake because, I'll show you the woman here. Okay, I'm editing here. It's Friday, June 9th. I did this last night on Thursday night. And so I just noticed something here, and I'm going to cover some of this at a voiceover in the end, but I noticed this point right here.
I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers.
So you stand with them if they just start murdering American citizens, right? You know, like I stand with ICE. President stands with ICE. We stand with all our law enforcement officers, no matter what they do. So there's no accountability. They start fucking popping American citizens on the street, beating the shit out of them. All the things. There's more stuff coming up about that high school that they went in after this thing happened. And so you stand with law enforcement no matter what, no matter how they treat fucking U.S. citizens or even immigrants. Like there's laws and there's protocols. I mean, anybody, right? I mean, everyone's a human being. Like you stand no matter what. Like, there's never been a bad police officer. There's never been a police officer that ever has abused power. Plus, he says all our law enforcement officers, ICE isn't law enforcement. I mean, they are border patrol, right? They're on the fucking streets. And they've just hired a shit ton of these fucking guys. And like I said, there are a bunch of fucking biker dudes running around there, right? Just violent fucking white dudes, right? Like just, so this is what you're left with. I want to cover this more at the end. Like I have some voiceover stuff to do here. I just want to get through these clips. This is gay D Vance, right? So this person writes, JD Vance is livid. Everyone repeating this lie, this same innocent woman out there drive in Minnesota, you should be ashamed of yourself, every single one of you. What the headline, okay, I guess that he said that. Let's get into that here. And so...
and part of that is recognizing that you people in the media...
Who you calling you people?
Not everybody in this room, but many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Boom. You should be ashamed of yourself. Shame, everybody use your name. This is so WWE right now. Like, it's just so fucked up. Like, wow. Renee Nicole Good. Her last name is Good. This is just bad, right? Here she is with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance blames Renee Nicole Good for being killed by ICE. Like, how dare she get in the way of the ICE, the good federal ICE agents' bullets? So here she is pregnant. There she is smiling. It's hard for me to... Everything looks so fake to me now. It's just this whole thing. So, here's Fox News, I'm sure. Jesse Walters to Mrs. Mother killed by ISIS. Selfish. This is, just divisive, and who the fuck knows how this is going to... What kind of riots and what kind of bullshit they're going to roll out, and this anarchist stuff, and, things are going to get worse for you. Like, that's... this is what's, whatever this is, real, fake, whatever this is, it's going to get worse for everybody because that's how this thing always ends up. One more thing here.
So I just want to tell folks what we're looking at here. This is neighboring St. Paul, where there are clashes taking place right now, live pictures. Protesters are clashing with what appears to be ICE agents, and it...
Okay, so, when the dust settles from all these things, and this is just one in many things that are going to be happening, it's your lifestyle will be gone, right? Like, what you recognize as American life is over, right? This is, I had a whole folder called martial law. I should just go through, a lot of it had to do with the Boston bombing and some of these other things, years ago. And it was clear at some point they were going to roll out martial law. And Trump is already doing this with federal agents on the streets and now with the ICE shit and all the rest of this. And, these are like military trained, tactical, fucking fuck you guys out there. And they're interacting with American citizens. And, right now it's a liberal community. And the right wing is like, oh my God, yes, this is great. But then, wait till Democrats have a hold of this. It's like the clone army that was set up for, the Emperor in the Star Wars movies, right? So, whatever. Like, whatever way this plays out, it ain't going to be good for everybody. I mean, this is them taking away your lifestyle and what you think of you as your American legal rights, judicial, and the rest of them.
appears that the protesters were trying to enter a federal building, and they are.
Well, right now, these
Oh,
images.
you mean they're trying to do an insurrection? Are they trying to do an insurrection, these liberal protesters?
Is obviously our police officers are
This is
surrounding
Border Patrol.
and keeping our officers.
Look at this guy came to the protest prepared.
Keeping them on the ground. John?
Yeah, we will keep an eye on this. But clearly a heated clash here. And this has been a concern all along. Minneapolis and St. Paul, right across the river, have been a bit of a powder keg. We know that, of course, is where George Floyd was killed in 2020. It's, there's been ICE operations stepped up in recent weeks.
Look at them fucking combating these fucking biker dudes with cameras and fucking gas masks. So it's like, whatever. All right, let me just, I'm going to get this video up tomorrow. Tomorrow was going to be my day off where I don't put up a video, and then I'll just take Saturday off. This video, I've already done a long voiceover, and I just got to add these things to it. I'll do that tomorrow morning, then we'll move on from there. Okay, so it's Friday the 9th of January. I'm going to release this video today and take tomorrow off. I just decided, because of the nature of this story. And here's 2 more clips I have that just popped up this morning, or 1 clip that popped up, and then 2 clips that are about something my wife told me about, which is bombing Mexico cartels.
Tragedy yesterday would do anything to change the approach the Department of Homeland Security is taking in Minnesota, you would be wrong. Shortly after an ICE agent shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Gold in her car, masked armed Border Patrol agents, led by the so-called head of CBP, a man named Craig Bavino, entered the grounds of Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis during dismissal time. They began tackling people, handcuffed 2 staff members, and fired pepper spray at bystanders, according to Minnesota Public Radio. Some of these bystanders captured real-time disturbing video.
All right, we saw some of this. One of my videos my wife sent me. I think this was the same place. All right, I'm going to cover this in a voiceover.
That was a grenade!
Guys, don't antagonize them. They literally just killed someone.
Don't antagonize them. They literally just killed somebody. Jesus Christ. So this is where we're at. Then these 2 things here. Then this one here.
The Trump administration planning a new mission to target drug cartels in Mexico. This is all according to 4 current and former U.S. officials familiar with that effort. The operation would include American troops and intelligence officers on the ground striking drug labs and cartel leaders south of the border. This would essentially open a new front in the president's military campaign against cartels, which is thus far focused on strikes against alleged drug-carrying boats. Well, on Saturday, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced what appears to be the 15th boat strike in the Caribbean.
Okay, so they're just going for it. I'm going to explain all this in the voiceover. I'll get one more thing here. Okay, then let's end with this thing here.
If you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay?
If you are...
Jesus Christ. So that's where we're at, right? This guy has fucked his the people behind him. The MAGA base. Like, he's completely fucked them. They don't even know they've been fucked. We'll get to that one. Switch over to voiceover here. Okay, so I just want to show you this one clip of D Vance again.
She was trying to ram this guy with her car.
She tried to run him over with his car, right? Let's start there. He's a lying sack of shit, because clearly that's not what she was doing. So his whole premise, his whole story here, which I think probably all you guys know is bullshit, is that this guy was recently run over by a car. And this woman was trying to run him over. So first of all, she turned her car sideways. She was blocking the ICE agent. She was just being a dick. And these protests are retarded. They don't work. They don't. And what are you going to do? Like, you're going to stop these fucking thugs? And you're going to stop Trump by protesting, right? Like fucking ringing your bells or whatever, blowing your whistles. What the fuck are you going to do? These guys have weapons and they're willing to fucking kill American citizens. Are obviously angry, fucking disturbed individuals, right? But you know what they do is this is what they did with Hamas, and it's what they do with all these enemies, Al Qaeda, all these people. That their sole reason for living is to be your villain, to be your hater. Like, this woman's just out there to run over ICE agents, right? So it's obvious. And again, I think this is all like staged and fake. I don't think this is, whatever it is, right? But, in terms of the official story. And this woman, if this woman was actually a citizen that was murdered by ICE, they're making a statement. Either way, they're making a statement here, right? Trump, D Vance, ICE. And so this woman, if she was doing what they said she was doing, she was blocking traffic, she's a part of some kind of protest, and then she realizes she's going to get arrested and that she's scared of these guys. And like, the people's commitment, like, she has a life, she has kids. You think she just wanted to throw her whole life away to run over an ICE agent? Why didn't she just plow her car into these things? You think she's a fucking suicide bomber? And so that's just fucking retarded, right? Retarded. The second piece here is this. If that guy was run over by a car before, a car is a weapon. So, when somebody has a firearm, you have to, put yourself in a position to be successful against, if someone's going to draw their firearm, something like this, and, whatever, if someone pulls out a knife, a car is a weapon too. And so if this guy's been run over by a car, and I guess that's coming out as bullshit, but let's say this actually happened, he would be in a situation where he wouldn't put himself in front of a fucking car because it's very limited, right? A car can only go straight and reverse, like you can kind of swerve into you sideways. But the fact of the matter is, when you're in a stationary car, it's different if you're going 40 or 50 miles an hour and you have to dodge a car. But the woman's going from where she's at a stop and standstill, and the guy just can sidestep the car, right? Why would he put himself in front of the car, which he really wasn't in front of the car, if he had been hit before, right? You don't know what that person's going to do. Every person who's in any kind of law enforcement knows that, you see cops come up and they put themselves behind the driver, right? So they don't get shot, and they don't fucking stand in front of the car, and they don't get between their car and a car in front of them. Like, if the person could slam you into a parked car in front of you, right? When cops approach you, they don't get in front. You never get in front of a car where somebody might fucking hit the gas and go and like try to run you over. But if they did, she was going so slowly that he could easily get out of the way. And so she wasn't trying to run him over, which everybody fucking should know. And the guy, wasn't in a dangerous position. So it wasn't self-defense. Like, everybody knows that. So what's important about that is who's going to buy that. Like, Fox News is going along with that story because they're fucked. Like, they're just, shitty. And some of the dumb fuck Trumpers who, if you talk to somebody and they're like, oh, that woman, that bitch deserved it. She was trying to run the guy over the car, and the guy, guy's is a hero. Like, if you hear somebody say that, the guy should get a fucking medal, that person's basically brain dead and worthless like that. And that's a small percentage of the population at this point with Trump all Epsteined up and all these things. So this is like a fuck you lie, right? This is like, fuck you guys, what are you going to do? I mean, this whole event is like a fuck you guys. Fuck you, American citizens. We're putting Border Patrol people on the streets. And fuck you guys, fuck you liberals, fuck, everybody. And so why are they doing that? Like, what would be the advantage to doing that? What would be the strategy here? I covered a little bit of it already, but the first piece would be this. They want to bring back the protests, like the Antifa protests and the Black Lives Matter protests, right? They want to bring those back for a variety of reasons. One, you're not talking about Epstein, which is always a thing. Trump is totally complicit with Epstein. They're doing everything they can to stop that. Two, they want to bring in martial law, and no particular order, right? But they've wanted to bring in martial law for a while. And Trump is going to handle these protests completely different than he did leading up to the election. Like if there's these organized protests, which there already are, this growing, concern and dissatisfaction, these left-wing dopes just walk into it. I'm sure they're being handled by, these powers that be to create a martial law situation. And so they can't wait to do these protests again. And these protests are so limp-dicked, and these people are shooting people in the fucking face and tear gassing kids, and they're just like beating the shit out of people. They're already fucking, there's no rule of law. This is like just thugs on the street, like they've hired, racist nationalist biker thugs, and they're just going out there beating the shit out of people, and and saying this is the new fucking your new normal. And the liberals are going out there with whistles, and they want to push this idea of left-wing violence with the Charlie Kirk narrative. And so they'll bring in these provocateurs, right? That movie, One Battle After Another, where they have these radical left violent people. And, like terrorist kind of group, like a legitimate one. It's kind of a comedy, the movie. But they have a part where this guy's trying to get into this, the Sean Penn character, spoiler alert. He's trying to get into this, like, this Illuminati type group called the Christmas Club or something. And it's all these white racist moneyed people, and he's a military guy, but he's had this relationship with this black woman, and he's got a biracial kid, and they won't let him in the club. So he's trying to get this girl, and he's brought the military into this town of illegal aliens, but he's just trying to get this girl. And there's protests on the street, and there's a point where the cops say, bring in the Kraken or something like that. I forget what it was. And it's a cop dressed up in these anarchists. They've used these anarchists, since the 1930s. And they pretend to be protesting, but they always escalate the situation. This guy throws a Molotov cocktail firebomb, and it gets the cops, to be able to go and beat the shit out of people. These staged people, these, provocateurs. And so this is one of the reasons, obviously. They want to bring in martial law. They want to bring in the chaos of the, Black Lives Matter 2024, these things that led up to the election. And Trump is going to react to them completely different and start killing and beating the shit out of people to provoke more of this stuff and then to bring in more troops and more whatever. So they're clearly pushing for that. It's, the reaction by the liberals, the reaction by the liberal media, the reaction by these potential protesters, and they only know one stupid thing, right? You see it across the board. The protests are everywhere, and that this is what they're pushing for. And D Vance coming out and saying, fuck you, is just exacerbating the situation. But the number one thing that they're saying here is, when there's this fuck you statement, which is not just his statement, but it's also ICE coming out and not being like, all right, we fucked up, let's de-escalate the situation. They came in fucking cracking heads, right? So the number one thing that they're saying here is we can do whatever the fuck we want. Like, there's laws, but we're not obeying them or acknowledging them, and we're just going to make up bullshit stuff, and whoever is going against us is a terrorist. Trump has been saying this for a while. They're making America great. They're saving America. He's doing the best job ever. And anybody getting in his way and anybody criticizing him is a fucking terrorist and a traitor like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Anybody's trying to release the Epstein files and derail Trump has a conspiracy against him and has to be stopped. Anybody in his party, the Republican Party, anybody, of course the Democrats, the liberals, or any just person anywhere, anybody saying shit about Donald Trump is a fucking traitor to the country and wants America to fail and has to be stopped, right? The laws don't matter. The Constitution doesn't matter. We're going to just beat the shit out of you, stomp on you if you don't fucking like it, right? The rights that you have are all illusionary. They're illusionary for lots of reasons, because the government can't give you rights, right? The government is just a false construct, and I talk about this. This is why I say you can't serve two masters. You can't serve your government and God. You can't serve your country and God, because your country is ultimately going to go against God's will, right? But in terms of what I'm saying here, there is eminent domain laws where they can just take your property. Like they're giving you permission to own land. So that's like the basis of all this. Your house is, you're given permission by the government to have the land, their land. And it's like almost like you're leasing it until such time where they're like, fuck you, we're just going to take your land. You know, they'll give you fair market value, which is never what it's, you know, never what the land is actually worth. And they can just start doing that. Like they can just start taking everybody's land and putting people in 15-minute cities, you know, these, you know, whatever they're calling those things now, smart cities. And so, you know, they can do that any time. And if they can do that, then they can do anything else. They can take any of your property, seize your property. And you see this when they come in. They call somebody a cartel, drug cartel, you know, drug dealer, and they seize all this person's property, right? They have the right to take everything from you. All your money, all your, you know, whatever it might be. And so they just don't do it. Like they only do it when they have to or when they want to. And that's what we're in with Trump, where they're just, you know, we saw it with the Israeli protests, you know, people protesting with Israel, these young college kids. And there's just this fuck you attitude towards the colleges that allowed this, will cut off your funds, will stop you, and will basically destroy you in one way or another. And then all these other institutions and the people. It's a, you know, now there's an adversarial relationship, and it's always been there. Like there's always an adversarial relationship. Like when you see cops walking through the airport with machine guns, does that make you feel safe? Does that make you feel like, you know, they're there for you? When you see fucking military walking through the airports or walking through the streets, that makes you feel safe, right? That makes you feel like, you know, they're there to protect me. I mean, there's dumb fucks who are Trump people, who are supposed to be constitutional people, who don't, you know, the number one rule of law or whatever is part of the Constitution, posse comitatus, this idea that military can't be on the streets. Trump's already violated that. That's the number one thing. Once they put military in the streets, you're fucked. You know, military isn't there to be police. They're not trained. They're there to kill people. They're trained to kill people. We saw how bad this went in Iraq when, you know, these military people had to go door to door and just take people's homes, you know, go in their homes, take their stuff, ransack their homes looking for weapons because of the situation in Iraq. You know, they're there to fight an army. When the Iraqi government, when the Iraqi army said, we're not going to fight you, we're just going to fold into the population and we're going to be with the civilians and you're going to have to come find us. And they ended up ultimately becoming an asset. America had to cut a deal with them and then create this bullshit thing called ISIS, which is, you know, they gave them an oil field. ISIS had an oil field, and they would drive these Toyota trucks. Remember, there's this guy, Bob the plumber from Texas. He sold his truck to some dealership, and ISIS really liked these Toyota trucks, and they were selling all these Toyota trucks to fucking ISIS. And they were driving around this truck that said Bob the plumber, and this guy from Texas was being harassed by his, you know, neighbors and people saying, hey, Bob, why'd you sell your truck to ISIS? Right? Like, it's just this bullshit thing. And so they can take everything from you at any time, and they just say, fuck you. You know, this is what we're doing. And the Democrats have nothing. And they're also saying, what are you going to do? Like, what the fuck are you going to do, right? Like, this is like some bully pushing you and saying, what are you going to do? And you're out, you know, you're outmatched. You either can just get your ass kicked for no reason, or you capitulate. You give them your fucking lunch money. And the Democrats, oh, we're going to blow whistles. You know, Democrats don't have any fucking guns. Liberals don't have any, you know, real, I mean, they have some fucking violent whatever, maybe a few ex-military people, but mostly that's Republicans. And so the Democrats don't have any recourse. You know, when Trump just ignores any kind of consequences, like let's say they try to impeach him, he just says, fuck you, right? Like, you know, and what are you going to do then? Now, you know, you're going to, the military is going to have to make a choice to back the president or to back the Congress. I mean, you're going to have these constitutional crises. And Trump's in fuck you mode, right? Just fuck you. What are you going to do about it? Like, this is what I'm doing. Who's going to stop me? And so when I said year of accountability, I didn't mean there was going to be law enforcement accountability. There's going to be courts accountability. There's going to be some kind of media accountability, because that ship has sailed. I'm talking about divine accountability. Like when a country is just, you know, unhinged and it runs its course and somebody's just acting in like a reckless way, like fucking Scarface, you know, like someone's all coked up and acting like fucking crazy and just, you know, lost their shit. Eventually the divine consequences kick in. And the divine consequences is the divine accountability I mean, I could have changed the year of accountability to divine accountability. And that's where things just start to crack and the things start happening beyond the control of these so-called powerful people, and they start losing their shit because they feel indestructible. Like when anybody gets this kind of attitude that Trump has, his administration has, there's always fucking consequences. You know, when people think they're all powerful, they're always taken down. This is, you know, it's like a self-sabotageable way of being. And America's crumbling because of it. And this is just the latest example. I don't know how long this thing is going to go on, but I'm sure they're going to escalate this. They obviously want protests. You know, I just turned on the news this morning for breakfast, and they're just all covering this, you know, this thing. They're covering the protests. They're, you know, people are like outraged. I mean, all this stuff. And the Democrats and people are losing it. Even like people who are on the right who are kind of, they've lost their faith in Trump and they see what's going on. Like, who's going to believe this woman tried to run that guy over, and that guy had, the only thing he could have done was shoot her in the fucking head. Like, that was his only option. Like, he had no other fucking options but to pull out his fucking firearm. You know, if you're pulling out your firearm, you could easily get out of the fucking way. And the woman wasn't getting away, right? Like, she, you know, you have her license plate, you know, like, you could just have law enforcement go pick her up. You could run her down with your cars, right? I mean, she's, you know, she's not getting away. I mean, this is, you know, this woman's, and when she does get away, you know, she's not committing any crime but blocking the road and being a fucking douche with her protests. She's not committing a crime, so you don't get to shoot her in the fucking head, right? If a suspect is fleeing the scene of the crime, you don't get to shoot that person unless they're shooting at you or they're shooting civilians or they're brandishing a firearm. You know, just because she's driving away, and, you know, like she's going like 2 fucking miles an hour when he's shooting her. You know, she's not any danger to anybody. She's just driving her fucking car away. It's not, you can't get to just shoot her. Like, you can't. It wasn't self-defense. Anybody can fucking see it. And they're saying right in your, what you saw, you didn't see. That's what they're saying here. What you just saw, you didn't see. Right? And what you just saw is fake as fuck anyway. Because whatever they're putting out there is to garner a reaction. This is all about creating a reaction. And now we see the reaction, and they have a solution, which is martial law. And just more of the same. And they're just going to clamp down more and more, and you're going to see it. Like, they're recreating the Black Lives Matter protest. This is, you know, where the George Floyd thing started. And they're just doing it again. There's something about Minnesota that they have this whole thing going on. And the left is complicit, at least on some level. You know, there's people on the left that know what the right's doing, and they're complicit. They're working together. To, you know, and all these people working for Israel and all that stuff, you know, that owned by these various corporations and the banks and all these, you know, the influences that they have. You know, America is toast, right? America is, you know, they can't support your lifestyle. They have to sell this to you. It's a lot harder with Americans because we have guns. Americans have guns, and we have, you know, a total different attitude than other people around the world who, their countries are a lot older, and they've been through these kind of things before. You know, they don't have they're not the all-powerful dominant country, and they're not as entitled as we are. Many of them have had economic collapses, and, you know, they've been invaded, and they have, you know, they have these issues where the people don't realize their lifestyle isn't guaranteed, right? And a lot of these countries have, you know, different attitude, and the countries aren't, you know, I mean, as vast as America is, trying to control every, you know, American citizens have 450 million guns, right? And so disarming Americans is a lot harder than it was in Australia and some of these other countries. You know, they have 30 million people like in Australia or something like that, right? 40 million people. You understand the, you know, the differences here. And so to get Americans to buy into this, it's going to take a lot more. You know, at some point your lifestyle is going to be, you know, you realize it's done. You know, your lifestyle is out of stock. And like when that happens, then Americans are going to react whatever type of way, and there's going to be shit going down. And there's like this spiritual purpose I talked about earlier, where people have to evolve on to a higher level of consciousness, and that isn't going to happen by choice. Like, there's going to have to be some, you know, shit that goes down to make Americans do that. So all these things are in play. All right, let me wrap this one up here and get it up on the, you know, on YouTube's, and then I'll skip Saturday and I'll put another video up on Sunday. There'll be content on my 2 other channels, Gratefulness Meditation channel and Apocalypse Now channel on Saturday. And yeah, so there it is. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Roboto, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.